The cold Arizona wind carried the scent of rain across the cemetery hillside as Ethan Reynolds knelt before the simple headstone. 3 years to the day, yet the pain remained as raw as an open wound. He placed a single white rose against the weathered granite, his calloused fingers lingering on the engraved letters that spelled her name, Sarah Elizabeth Reynolds, beloved wife and mother. The November sky hung heavy above him, gray clouds pregnant with unshed tears that matched his own. Ethan pulled his worn leather coat tighter against the chill, but nothing could warm the hollowness inside him. "You were right, Sarah," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "People can't be trusted. Justice is just a bitter joke." The wind swallowed his words, carrying them away like ashes. "The boy and I are fine, in our own way." A raindrop splashed against the stone, then another, as if the heavens themselves mourned with him. Ethan remained motionless, letting the cold seep into his bones. It was fitting somehow, this physical discomfort, a pale shadow of the emptiness he'd carried since that terrible night when both Sarah and their unborn daughter had slipped away from him. He touched the small silver cross hanging from a chain around his neck, Sarah's final gift to him. He'd nearly thrown it away a dozen times, his faith as hollow as his heart after she died. But something had stayed his hand each time. Perhaps it was the memory of how her eyes had lit up when she gave it to him, or maybe just the stubborn part of him that couldn't bear to lose one more piece of her. The rain fell harder now, soaking through his clothes, but still Ethan knelt. Only when the sky darkened toward evening did he finally rise, his knees stiff and aching, and turn toward home. The small ranch house stood isolated against the vast Arizona landscape, 20 miles from the nearest neighbor, 40 from the town of Whitewater Creek. Ethan had chosen this place for its solitude after leaving his position as Border Patrol officer 3 years ago. Here, with just his son and the endless sky for company, the ghosts of his past couldn't find him so easily. As he approached on horseback, Ethan saw Noah standing at the window, a small silhouette against the warm lamplight within. 10 years old, but with eyes that had witnessed too much sorrow for a child. The boy had barely spoken more than a handful of words since Sarah's death, retreating into a silence as vast and impenetrable as the desert surrounding them. Ethan dismounted, led his horse into the small stable, and removed the saddle with practiced movements. The familiar routine of caring for the animal gave him comfort, a simple task with clear purpose, unlike the tangled mess his life had become. Inside the house, the fire had burned low in the hearth. Noah remained at the window, his back to his father, thin shoulders rigid beneath his cotton shirt. "You should have put more wood on the fire," Ethan said, dropping his wet coat by the door and moving to stoke the dying embers. "It'll be a cold night." Noah didn't respond, didn't even turn. Ethan sighed and added logs to the fireplace, watching as flames licked eagerly at the dry pine. "Did you eat anything?" Ethan asked, knowing the answer before Noah's slight head shake confirmed it. "I'll heat up some stew." As Ethan moved around the kitchen, the silence between them stretched taut as a wire. It hadn't always been this way. Before Sarah's death, the house had been filled with laughter and music. Noah's childish giggles, Sarah's soft singing as she worked the sound of the family Bible being read aloud each evening. Now only the crackling fire and the howling wind disturbed the quiet. Ethan placed a bowl of reheated stew on the table. "Come eat, Noah." The boy finally turned from the window, his face a pale oval in the dim light. He moved to the table but didn't touch the food, instead staring down at the steaming bowl, as if it held answers to questions he couldn't voice. "Pa!" Noah's voice, rarely used, sounded strange in the quiet room. "If God is real, why did he take Mom away?" The familiar question asked 100 times in 3 years, never with a satisfactory answer. Ethan sat heavily in the chair across from his son, suddenly exhausted beyond words. "I don't know, son," he admitted. The same answer he always gave, inadequate as it was. "I stopped trying to understand God's reasons a long time ago." Noah picked up his spoon but didn't eat. "The Reverend says Mom is watching over us from heaven." His voice was flat, disbelieving. "But if she could see us, wouldn't she be sad? Wouldn't she come back?" Ethan rubbed his face, feeling the rough stubble against his palm. "Eat your stew before it gets cold." Noah took a small bite, then another, mechanical movements without pleasure. Ethan watched him, this small boy who looked so much like Sarah, the same serious eyes, the same stubborn set to his jaw. Sometimes it hurt just to look at him. Later, after Noah had gone to bed, Ethan sat alone by the fire nursing a small glass of whiskey. He rarely drank, had seen too many men lose themselves to the bottle, but tonight, on the anniversary of Sarah's death, he allowed himself this small comfort. Outside, the storm strengthened, wind battering the walls of the small house. Ethan listened to the familiar creaks and groans of the structure standing firm against nature's assault. Like him, weathered and worn, but still standing. He lifted his glass in a silent toast to Sarah's memory, then drained it in a single swallow. Tomorrow would be another day of work and silence, of going through the motions of living while feeling half dead inside. But tonight, just for tonight, he allowed himself to remember the warmth of her smile, the sound of her laughter, and the way her hand had felt in his. Morning dawned clear and cold, the storm having scrubbed the sky to a brilliant blue. The rain had transformed to frost overnight, coating every surface with a delicate white crystal sheen that sparkled in the early sunlight. "We need to check the fences on the north side," Ethan told Noah over a breakfast of biscuits and coffee. That storm likely brought down some posts. Noah nodded, his face solemn as always. The boy was dressed warmly in layers prepared for the bitter cold without being told. He'd grown self-sufficient out of necessity after Sarah's death, learning to cook simple meals, mend his own clothes, and handle chores around the ranch with minimal guidance. Sometimes Ethan felt a surge of pride at his son's resilience, quickly followed by guilt that Noah had been forced to grow up so fast. They rode out together, Ethan on his chestnut gelding Thunder and Noah on his pony Dust, a dappled gray mare with a gentle disposition. The frozen landscape stretched before them, the distant mountains sharp and clear against the sky. Their breath formed clouds in the frigid air, and the horses' hooves crunched through the frosted grass. Ethan watched Noah from the corner of his eye as they rode. The boy sat straight in his saddle, his face set in concentration as he navigated the uneven terrain. He was a natural horseman, with an instinctive understanding of the animal beneath him that reminded Ethan of Sarah. She'd grown up on a cattle ranch in Texas, had been riding before she could walk, or so she'd claimed. They rode in companionable silence for nearly an hour, checking fence posts and making mental notes of repairs needed. The work was simple but necessary, good and honest labor that kept the mind occupied and the hands busy. It was Noah who spotted the blood first. "Pot," he called, his voice sharp with alarm, pointing toward a patch of crimson, stark against the white frost. Ethan reined Thunder to a stop, narrowing his eyes at the disturbing sight. Bright red droplets spattered across the frozen ground, fresh enough that they hadn't fully congealed despite the cold. "Stay here," he told Noah, dismounting and handing the reins to his son. "But Pa, I said stay here," Ethan repeated firmly, unholstering the revolver he kept at his hip. 3 years away from law enforcement hadn't dulled his instincts. Something was wrong here, and he wouldn't risk Noah's safety. He followed the blood trail cautiously, each drop leading him further from the fence line and toward a large cottonwood tree that stood alone on a small rise. The tracks were clear in the frost. Someone had dragged themselves across the ground, leaving a smeared path of red against white. As he approached the tree, Ethan heard a soft moan, barely audible above the whisper of wind through bare branches. He tightened his grip on his revolver and moved around the massive trunk. There, curled against the gnarled roots, lay a young woman. Her dark hair fell in tangled waves across her face, and her clothes, a simple dress and shawl, were torn and bloodied. Even huddled as she was, Ethan could see the prominent swell of her belly. She was heavily pregnant, perhaps 7 months along. Ethan holstered his weapon and knelt beside her. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" The woman's eyes flew open at his voice, deep brown eyes filled with terror. With surprising speed, she scrambled backward against the tree trunk, one hand protectively covering her swollen belly, while the other drew a small knife from the folds of her dress. "No me toques. No me lleves de vuelta," she cried, her voice hoarse with fear. "Don't touch me. Don't take me back." Ethan raised his hands, palms out. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said slowly, clearly. The woman's eyes darted past him, scanning the empty landscape as if expecting others to appear. She was young, 16, perhaps 17 at most, with features that suggested mixed heritage, Mexican and Native American. Her skin was bronze but pale from blood loss and cold, her lips blue-tinged, her entire body trembling. The sound of hoofbeats made them both turn. Noah had disobeyed, riding Dust toward them with Thunder's reins in hand. Ethan felt a flash of anger at his son's defiance, quickly replaced by concern as Noah dismounted and approached. "Noah, I told you to stay back," Ethan said sharply. But Noah ignored him, moving slowly toward the frightened woman. To Ethan's astonishment, the boy spoke in halting Spanish words he must have learned from Miguel, the Mexican shepherd, who occasionally helped with the sheep. "Seguro," Noah said softly. "Nosotros ayudar." Safe. We help. The woman's eyes widened, shifting between father and son. The knife in her hand wavered, then lowered slightly. "¿Quiénes son ustedes?" she asked weakly. "Who are you?" Noah looked to his father, his Spanish exhausted. Ethan stepped forward cautiously. "My name is Ethan Reynolds. This is my son, Noah. We have a ranch nearby." He gestured toward the horizon. "You're hurt. We can help you." The woman swayed slightly, her face contorting with pain. Her free hand pressed harder against her belly, and Ethan noticed fresh blood seeping through her dress. "Ayuda, bebé," she whispered, the knife falling from her grasp as she slumped forward. Ethan lunged forward, catching her before she hit the ground. She weighed almost nothing in his arms, a bird with hollow bones. Up close, he could see bruises on her face and neck, some fresh, others yellowing with age. Whatever had happened to this girl, she'd been suffering for some time. "Noah, bring the horses closer." Ethan ordered, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his chest. It had been years since he'd allowed himself to care about a stranger's troubles, had deliberately closed himself off from the suffering of others after Sarah's death. Yet something about this girl, alone and vulnerable in the wilderness, awoke the part of him he'd thought long dead. Noah brought the horses, his young face set in determination. "Is she going to die, P, like Mom?" The question hit Ethan like a physical blow. "No," he said firmly, though he had no right to make such promises. "No, she's not going to die. We won't let her." With careful movements, Ethan lifted the unconscious woman onto Thunder's back, then mounted behind her, supporting her limp form against his chest. Noah clambered onto Dust, and together they rode toward home at a careful pace, mindful of their fragile cargo. As they crested the final rise before their ranch house came into view, Ethan looked down at the young woman in his arms. Her face relaxed in unconsciousness, showed her youth even more clearly, a child herself about to bring another child into this harsh world. "What are we going to do with her, Pa?" Noah asked, riding alongside. Ethan had been asking himself the same question. The logical thing would be to take her to town once she was stable enough to travel, let Dr. Matthews examine her and inform Sheriff Camden about the injured girl found on his property. That would be the proper course of action. But something deep in his gut warned against it. The girl's terror had been real, her desperation palpable. She was running from something or someone, and Ethan had seen enough of the world's cruelty to know that sometimes the law wasn't enough to protect the innocent. "We'll help her," he finally answered, the decision settling in his chest with unexpected rightness. "Whatever she's running from, she came to our land for a reason." Noah's face brightened with the first genuine expression of interest Ethan had seen in months, like the Good Samaritan in Mom's Bible stories. Ethan felt a twist of emotion at the reference to Sarah's beloved parables. "Something like that," he managed. "Now ride ahead and prepare the spare room. We need clean sheets, water, and bandages." As Noah urged Dust forward with newfound purpose, Ethan looked again at the unconscious woman in his arms. He didn't believe in signs or divine intervention, not anymore, but he couldn't deny the strange timing of finding this girl on the anniversary of Sarah's death. "Whatever your story is," he murmured to the woman who couldn't hear him, "I hope helping you doesn't bring hell down on us both." Ethan hesitated outside the door to Sarah's room, the young woman still unconscious in his arms. He hadn't entered this space in 3 years, had kept it locked and untouched since the night she died, a shrine to his grief. But the spare room was unheated, unsuitable for someone in the girl's condition. Sarah's room was the warmest in the house with its own small fireplace and afternoon sun. It was the only logical choice. Still, his hand trembled slightly as he turned the key in the lock. The door swung open on surprisingly silent hinges, revealing a room frozen in time. Sarah's brush still lay on the dressing table, strands of her auburn hair caught in the bristles. Her favorite shawl was draped over the rocking chair by the window. The quilt she'd made herself a wedding gift from her mother covered the bed in a riot of blues and greens. The air was stale but carried a faint, lingering trace of lavender, Sarah's favorite scent. Ethan felt his throat tighten as the memories washed over him. Sarah brushing her hair before bed. Sarah reading by lamplight. Sarah rounded with child in those final happy months before tragedy struck. "Pa!" Noah's voice broke through his reverie. "The water's heating." Ethan nodded, forcing himself to step across the threshold. He laid the woman gently on the bed, removing her torn shawl to better assess her injuries. "Noah, fetch my medical kit from the study," he instructed, turning down the quilt. The boy ran off, eager to help. Alone with the unconscious woman, Ethan took a professional inventory of her visible injuries. The dress she wore, once a simple blue cotton, was filthy and torn, revealing troubling marks beneath. Rope burns encircled her wrists and ankles, some fresh and raw, others scabbed over. Bruises in various stages of healing mapped patterns of abuse across her visible skin. But it was the brand on her shoulder revealed when her dress slipped that made Ethan's blood run cold. A small but distinct T burned into her flesh like cattle, the mark of ownership. He recognized it immediately, the Triple T Ranch owned by Theodore Thornton, the wealthiest and most powerful man in the territory. Thornton had fingers in every business from Whitewater Creek to Tucson, and whispers of his cruelty toward his workers, especially those of Mexican or native descent, were common though never spoken too loudly. Ethan knew Thornton all too well. 3 years ago, when Ethan was still wearing a badge, he'd begun investigating a series of suspicious deaths at the Triple T Mexican workers who'd accidentally fallen from horses or been found drowned in shallow creeks. Before he could gather enough evidence, pressure from above had shut down his investigation. A month later, Thornton had attended the funeral of another young Mexican ranch hand with a smile on his face, and Ethan had turned in his badge, unable to serve a law that protected men like Thornton instead of their victims. And now one of Thornton's marked possessions lay in Sarah's bed, pregnant and injured. Noah returned with the battered leather medical kit, a remnant from Ethan's days patrolling the border, when basic medical knowledge was as essential as knowing how to shoot. "Is she going to wake up soon?" Noah asked, hovering by the bed, his eyes wide with concern. "I don't know, son," Ethan admitted, opening the kit. "She's lost blood and she's exhausted. The baby complicates things." Noah frowned. "What baby?" "She's going to have a baby soon," Ethan explained, gesturing to her swollen belly. "That's why we need to be extra careful with her." Noah's expression turned solemn. "Like Mom was going to have a baby?" Ethan's hand stilled. "Yes," he said softly. "Like that." A kettle whistled from the kitchen, breaking the moment. "Go get that water," Ethan directed, grateful for the interruption. "And find one of my clean shirts. We need to get her out of these dirty clothes." While Noah was gone, Ethan gently examined the woman's belly through her dress. The child within moved against his touch, a strong, healthy movement that gave him hope. Whatever this young woman had endured, the baby seemed resilient. Noah returned with washed clean cloths and one of Ethan's shirts. Together, they worked to clean the worst of the woman's wounds, Ethan showing Noah how to apply salve to the rope burns and bandage them carefully. The boy was a quick study, his small hands surprisingly gentle as he mimicked his father's actions. "What's her name, Pa?" Noah asked as they worked. "I don't know. She didn't tell me before she passed out." "We should call her something." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "She already has a name, Noah. She'll tell us when she wakes up." The woman stirred slightly at the sound of their voices, her eyelids fluttering. Noah leaned closer, fascinated. "I think she's waking up." Her eyes opened fully this time, deep brown and immediately alert with fear. She gasped and tried to sit up, looking wildly around the unfamiliar room. "No, ¿dónde estoy? No, where am I?" Ethan raised his hands palms out as he had done earlier. "You're safe," he said clearly. "We brought you to our home. You collapsed. Do you remember?" The woman's gaze darted between Ethan, Noah, and the door, clearly calculating her chances of escape. Her hand moved protectively to her belly as the baby shifted visibly beneath the fabric of her dress. "No one will hurt you here," Ethan continued, maintaining a calm voice. "My son and I want to help you." Noah stepped forward, offering her a cup of water. "Agua," he said in his limited Spanish. The woman hesitated, then reached for the cup with trembling hands. She drank deeply, the water clearly a relief to her parched throat. When she finished, she lowered the cup and studied them both with wary eyes. "Gracias," she said softly. Then in halting English, "Thank you. For help." "You speak English?" Ethan asked. She nodded cautiously. "Some. Not very good." "That's all right. What's your name?" Again that hesitation, the calculation of trust. "Sophia," she finally answered. "Sophia Diaz." "I'm Ethan Reynolds. This is my son, Noah." Sophia's eyes lingered on Noah, softening slightly at the sight of the child. "How old?" she asked. "I'm 10, Noah answered for himself, standing a little straighter. A ghost of a smile touched Sophia's lips. 10 is good age." Ethan gestured to her injuries. "Who did this to you, Sophia?" The brief moment of openness vanished, replaced by guarded fear. She looked away, her fingers unconsciously tracing the brand on her shoulder. "You don't have to tell us now," Ethan said, recognizing her retreat. "You need rest. Are you hungry?" Sophia nodded, relief evident in her expression at the change of subject. "I'll get her some stew, Pa." Noah volunteered eagerly, already heading for the door. When Noah had gone, Sophia looked directly at Ethan, her gaze unexpectedly penetrating. "Why you help me? You don't know me." It was a fair question, one Ethan had been asking himself. In this territory, helping a pregnant, injured girl of mixed race could bring nothing but trouble, especially one bearing Thornton's mark. "Because it's the right thing to do," he answered simply. It was true if incomplete. There was something else driving him, perhaps the need to save someone when he couldn't save Sarah, or maybe just the basic human impulse to protect the vulnerable that he'd spent 3 years suppressing. Sophia seemed to accept this answer, though wariness remained in her posture. Her hand went to a small pouch tied at her waist, the one possession she'd managed to keep with her in her flight. "They will look for me," she said quietly, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. "Bad men. You in danger if I stay." "Let me worry about that," Ethan replied. "For now you need to rest and regain your strength. The baby needs you healthy." At the mention of her child, Sophia's expression transformed fierce protectiveness, replacing fear. "My baby, not theirs," she said firmly. "Never theirs." Before Ethan could respond, Noah returned with a bowl of steaming stew and a piece of bread. Sophia accepted the food with murmured thanks, eating with careful, measured bites despite what must have been intense hunger, the disciplined eating of someone who had known starvation. Ethan and Noah watched her eat, an unexpected feeling of rightness settling over the scene. For the first time in 3 years, their house contained someone other than the two of them, a presence that somehow made the rooms feel less empty, the shadows less deep. "You rest now," Ethan told Sophia when she'd finished eating. "We'll be just outside if you need anything." She nodded, already sinking back against the pillows, exhaustion claiming her, despite her obvious desire to remain vigilant. Her eyelids fluttered closed even as she fought to keep them open. In the hallway, Noah looked up at his father with an expression Ethan hadn't seen in years. Excitement, purpose, hope. "We're going to help her and the baby, aren't we?" "Pa," Ethan placed a hand on his son's shoulder, feeling the small body vibrating with newfound energy. "Yes, son, we're going to help them." "Like Mom would have wanted," Noah added softly. The simple statement caught Ethan off guard, opening a wound he thought had scarred over. Yes, Sarah would have insisted on helping this girl, would have brought her into their home without a second thought, would have fought anyone who tried to harm her. Sarah with her boundless compassion and fierce sense of justice. "Like Mom would have wanted," Ethan agreed, his voice rough with emotion. Night fell early as it did in November, darkness sweeping across the land like a tide. Ethan sat at the kitchen table cleaning his revolver by lamplight, a habit from his law enforcement days. The familiar routine of disassembling, cleaning, and reassembling the weapon helped him think. Finding Sophia complicated their quiet existence in ways he was still calculating. If she had indeed escaped from the Triple T Ranch, Thornton wouldn't let her go easily, especially not if the child she carried had connections to the Thornton family. Ethan had seen the calculating way Thornton treated his bloodline, his obsession with legacy and inheritance. The sound of movement made Ethan look up. Noah stood in the hallway, a Bible clutched to his chest, Sarah's Bible with its worn leather cover and pages marked with her neat handwriting. I thought I'd read to her, Noah explained, his voice uncertain. Mom always said reading helped the sick get better. Ethan felt a complex surge of emotions, pain at the memory, pride at his son's compassion, worry that Noah was becoming too attached to their guest. She's sleeping, son. Maybe tomorrow. Noah looked down at the book in his hands and back up at his father. I haven't read the Bible since Mom died, he admitted quietly. It made me too sad, but tonight I wanted to. Ethan set down the gun piece he had been polishing. Why tonight? Noah shrugged a child's gesture, hiding deeper thoughts. I don't know, it just felt right. He hesitated, then added, Mom used to say people are sent to us for a reason. Maybe Sophia was sent to us because we needed someone to help. The wisdom in his son's words struck Ethan with unexpected force. Was that what had been missing these past 3 years? Not just Sarah's physical presence, but the purpose she had brought to their lives, the constant drive to make the world a little better, to ease suffering where they found it. Maybe you're right, Ethan conceded, but she needs rest now. You can read to her tomorrow. Noah nodded, some of the old solemnity returning to his features. Good night, Pa. Good night, son. After Noah had gone to bed, Ethan finished cleaning his gun and checked that the house was secure for the night. He added wood to the fires, ensuring they would burn through the coldest hours before dawn. Finally, he paused outside Sarah's, now Sophia's, door, listening for any sound of distress. Hearing nothing, he quietly turned the handle and peered inside. Sophia lay sleeping, her face peaceful in the warm glow of the fire. One hand rested protectively over her rounded belly, rising and falling with her even breathing. Ethan started to withdraw, but something made him pause. In the flickering firelight, his gaze fell on Sarah's possessions, the hairbrush, the shawl, the books on the small bedside table. For 3 years, he'd preserved this room as a mausoleum, untouched and unchanging. Yet now, with Sophia's presence, it felt alive again. The room was serving its purpose, sheltering, comforting, healing, as Sarah would have wanted. A soft moan from Sophia drew his attention. She shifted in her sleep, her face contorting with pain or fear from some dream. Without thinking, Ethan moved to her side, pulling the chair closer to the bed. He didn't touch her. Instinct told him that unwanted contact might trigger more fear, but he sat quietly beside her, a silent presence, against whatever demons pursued her in sleep. Gradually, her breathing steadied, her expression relaxed. Ethan remained where he was, watching the firelight play across her features. She was so young, too young to have endured whatever horrors had led her to flee across the desert, pregnant and alone. His gaze shifted to the wedding portrait on the wall, Sarah, in her white dress, smiling with such joy it hurt to look at it now. Ethan, in his formal suit, standing proud and tall beside her, unaware that their happiness would be so cruelly brief. I don't know if this is what you would have wanted, Sarah, he whispered, his voice barely audible above the crackling fire. Bringing a stranger into our home, risking everything we built. He paused, watching Sophia's peaceful face. But Noah seems to need this. Maybe I do too. Sophia murmured something in her sleep, words in a language Ethan didn't recognize, possibly Apache. Her hand moved restlessly over her belly, and Ethan saw the baby shift beneath, a visible wave across her abdomen. The miracle of new life continuing despite everything. He settled back in the chair, prepared to maintain his vigil through the night. Outside, the wind sang its lonely song across the desert. But for the first time in 3 years, the house on Ethan Reynolds' ranch didn't feel quite so empty. Dawn broke with pale fingers of light stretching across the frost-covered land. Ethan, who had dozed intermittently in the chair by Sophia's bed, woke fully as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the curtains. Sophia still slept, her breathing deep, and even the healing sleep her body desperately needed. He rose quietly, muscles stiff from the uncomfortable position, and slipped out of the room. Noah was already awake. Ethan found sitting at the kitchen table with Sarah's Bible open before him. You're up early, Ethan observed, moving to stoke the kitchen fire. Noah looked up from the book. I was finding a good story to read to Sophia, one about someone like her. Ethan glanced at the open page. And what did you choose? Ruth, Noah answered. Mom used to read it to me, about the foreign woman who found a new family. He traced the words with his finger. Mom wrote notes in the margin. See? She said Ruth reminds us that family isn't always blood. Ethan felt a tightness in his chest as he looked at Sarah's neat handwriting filling the margins of the page. She'd always read scripture this way, interacting with it, questioning it, finding meaning beyond the surface. That's a good choice, Ethan managed, turning away to hide the emotion on his face. He busied himself preparing breakfast, cornmeal mush, with the last of the summer's preserved peaches. As he worked, he was acutely aware of Noah watching him, those solemn eyes that missed nothing. Pa, Noah said finally, do you think Mom sent Sophia to us? The question hung in the air between them, layered with all the complexities of faith and loss that had defined their relationship these past 3 years. Ethan measured his words carefully. I don't know, son. I'm not sure I believe in that kind of guidance anymore. He stirred the cornmeal, avoiding Noah's gaze. But if it helps you to think so, there's no harm in it. Noah closed the Bible gently. I think she did, he said with quiet certainty. Mom always said we're meant to meet the people who need us. Maybe God brought Sophia here because she needed us. Or because we needed her, Ethan thought, but didn't say. A sound from the hallway interrupted them, a shuffling step followed by a soft gasp. Ethan turned to see Sophia leaning against the doorframe, one hand braced against the wall for support, the other cradling her belly. She wore his shirt, several sizes too large for her small frame, falling to her knees like a dress. You should be resting, Ethan said, moving toward her. Sophia shook her head stubbornly. I rest too much. Move. She gestured to her legs. Not good to stay in bed with baby. Ethan had to concede the point. Sarah had remained active throughout her pregnancy until the final difficult weeks. At least sit down, he insisted, pulling out a chair at the table. You need to regain your strength. Sophia eased herself into the chair, wincing slightly. Noah immediately poured her a cup of water, which she accepted with a grateful smile. Thank you, Noah, she said, her English more confident this morning. You are a kind boy. Noah beamed at the praise, the first genuine smile Ethan had seen on his face in months. I found a Bible story to read to you, he told her eagerly, about a woman named Ruth who was a foreigner but found a new home. Sophia's eyes widened with interest. You read to me, I would like. Ethan brought bowls of cornmeal to the table, watching as Noah opened the Bible again, carefully positioning it so Sophia could see the pages. The boy began to read in a clear, steady voice, a voice Ethan had almost forgotten he possessed. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. As Noah read the ancient story of lost journey and unexpected kindness, Sophia listened with rapt attention, occasionally asking the meaning of a word she didn't understand. Ethan observed the scene with a strange feeling in his chest, something between pain and healing, as if an old wound were being reopened, but cleaned properly this time. When Noah reached Ruth's famous declaration of loyalty, where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Sophia nodded as if the words resonated deeply with her own experience. Beautiful words, she murmured. Loyalty is sacred thing. Noah looked up from the page, his expression earnest. That's what Mom wrote in the margin too. She said loyalty is a sacred covenant. Sophia's gaze moved to Ethan, a question in her eyes. Only then did Ethan realize they hadn't explained their situation to her, that she was sleeping in a dead woman's bed, wearing a dead woman's husband's shirt, listening to a dead woman's son read from a dead woman's Bible. My wife Sarah died 3 years ago, Ethan said quietly. Noah's mother. She was expecting our second child. There were complications. Understanding dawned in Sophia's eyes, followed by deep compassion. I am sorry, she said simply, the words carrying genuine weight, despite her limited English. Noah closed the Bible carefully. You're sleeping in her room, he added, matter of fact, in the way of children. Pa hasn't gone in there since she died. Not until you came. Sophia looked startled by this information, glancing toward the hallway, as if seeing the room differently now. I did not know. I can sleep elsewhere. No, Ethan interrupted, surprised by his own vehemence. No, it's right that you're there. Sarah would have wanted the room used to help someone in need. A moment of silence followed, filled with the weight of memory and new understanding. Ethan felt exposed, vulnerable. He rarely spoke of Sarah had built walls around his grief to contain it. Yet somehow Sophia's presence made those walls feel less necessary. Your wife, Sophia said hesitantly. She was a good person. The simple question caught Ethan off guard. Yes, he answered, his voice rough. The best I've ever known. Sophia nodded thoughtfully. Then I am honored to sleep in her room. She placed a hand over her heart. I will respect her memory. The sincerity in her voice struck Ethan deeply. There was a dignity to Sophia despite her youth and circumstances, a core of strength that reminded him unexpectedly of Sarah. Noah, sensing the emotional shift in the conversation, changed the subject with a child's intuition. Can I show Sophia the chickens after breakfast? And the new lambs? If she feels strong enough. Ethan agreed, grateful for the diversion. Sophia smiled at Noah, the expression transforming her tired face. I would like to see animals. In my mother's tribe, we believe animals bring messages from spirits. Noah's eyes widened with interest. What tribe was your mother from? Apache, Aravipa band. Pride filled her voice as she spoke of her heritage. My father was Mexican rancher. I am both. And your parents? Ethan asked carefully. Where are they now? The light in Sophia's eyes dimmed. Dead. Both dead. She looked down at her bowl, her next words so quiet they were barely audible. Father killed for his land. Mother died when I was small. Ethan recognized the deliberate vagueness in her answer, the protective instinct of someone who had learned that full truths could be dangerous. He wouldn't push, not yet. Trust needed to be earned. After breakfast, Noah eagerly led Sophia outside, supporting her elbow with surprising gentleness as they walked slowly around the small ranch. Ethan watched from the porch, alert for any sign that Sophia was overexerting herself, but she seemed to gain strength in the fresh air and sunshine. Noah showed her the chicken coop, the small vegetable garden, and the pen where the spring lambs were kept during cold weather. Sophia listened to his explanations with genuine interest, asking questions and smiling at his enthusiasm. Seeing them together, his son animated and engaged for the first time in years, the mysterious young woman with her quiet dignity and obvious kindness, Ethan felt something shift inside him. A crack in the wall of ice he'd built around his heart since Sarah's death. It was terrifying. For 3 years, he'd survived by feeling nothing, by going through the motions of living without truly engaging with life. Noah's withdrawal had made this easier, the boy's silence a mirror of his own emotional retreat. But now, watching Noah come alive in Sophia's presence, Ethan faced an uncomfortable truth. In protecting himself from further pain, he might have failed his son. The thought was interrupted by movement at the edge of his vision, a flash of something near the tree line beyond the pasture. Ethan straightened, hand moving instinctively to his hip, where his revolver would normally be. He left it inside, unwilling to wear a weapon openly around the already frightened Sophia. He scanned the distant trees carefully, years of border patrol training kicking in. There, a brief movement, the unmistakable shape of a person slipping between trunks. Someone was watching the ranch. Without alarming Noah and Sophia, Ethan casually made his way toward them. "Time to come inside," he called, keeping his voice light. "Sophia needs to rest, and we have chores to finish before midday." Noah looked disappointed but didn't argue. Sophia, however, caught something in Ethan's tone or expression. Her eyes darted to the tree line, then back to him, a question in their depths. Once they were inside, Ethan made sure Noah was occupied with gathering eggs from the indoor winter coop before turning to Sophia, who stood by the window, her posture tense. "Someone's out there," she said, not a question. "They found me." "I don't know who it is," Ethan admitted. "Run. Could be anyone. Trappers, travelers, even Apache scouts." Sophia shook her head firmly. "Not anyone. Them." Fear and certainty mingled in her voice. "I told you bad men look for me." "Who's Sophia? Who's looking for you?" She turned from the window, her hand going to the small pouch at her waist, the one possession she guarded so carefully. After a moment of internal struggle, she untied the pouch and withdrew a folded piece of paper, badly wrinkled, but intact. "This is why they want me dead," she said, holding it out to Ethan. "This is why they want my baby." Ethan took the paper and unfolded it carefully. It was a list of names, about 20 in all, with dates beside each one. Some he recognized as Mexican workers from the area, others were unfamiliar. All had died within the past 5 years, according to the dates. "I don't understand," Ethan said, looking up from the list. Sophia's eyes were hard with suppressed anger and grief. "These people all killed by Thornton family. My father's name there." She pointed to a name near the bottom. "Miguel Diaz, 15 May 1884. He wrote names down, evidence, before they killed him too." Ethan stared at the list with growing understanding. It was exactly what he'd tried and failed to compile during his investigation 3 years ago. Proof of Thornton's systematic elimination of those who stood in his way. "Where did you get this?" he asked. "My father hid in our house. After he died, I found." Her eyes flashed with determination. "I keep safe. For justice." The final piece of Sophia's puzzle clicked into place for Ethan. "And Thornton's men discovered you had this list." Sophia nodded, her hand moving protectively to her belly. "Victor Thornton, the son he..." She struggled for words, her limited English failing her. "He forced me, after my father died, many times." The brutal reality behind her simple statement made Ethan's blood boil. Victor Thornton, Theodore's youngest son, had a reputation for cruelty that rivaled his father's. "When I become..." Sophia gestured to her pregnant state. "They keep me prisoner. Say baby is Thornton heir." Her voice hardened. "But baby is mine, not theirs, never theirs." "How did you escape?" Ethan asked. A shadow crossed Sophia's face. "Victor tried to burn list. We fight, he fall." She made a striking motion. "Hit head on stone, not breathing after." Ethan absorbed this information with growing alarm. If Victor Thornton was dead, apparently by Sophia's hand, even in self-defense, then Theodore Thornton wouldn't rest until he found her. The man was known for his vendettas, his absolute refusal to let any slight go unpunished. "They will come," Sophia said, reading his expression accurately. "For me, for baby, for List." She took the paper back from him, refolding it with care. "You should make me leave. Protect your son." The rational part of Ethan agreed with her. Harboring Sophia put Noah in danger, risked everything they had. The sensible course would be to help her reach the border, give her enough money and supplies to make her way to Mexico, where Thornton couldn't follow. But looking at her young, alone, heavily pregnant, Ethan knew he couldn't do it. Something had awakened in him since finding Sophia beneath that cottonwood tree. Some part of himself he'd thought dead with Sarah. "No one's making you leave," he said firmly. "Not until you and the baby are strong enough to travel safely. And even then, only if that's what you want." Sophia studied his face, searching for certainty or deception. "Why?" she asked again, the same question from the night before. "Why risk for stranger?" Ethan looked toward the hallway where Sarah's room lay, the room he hadn't entered for 3 years until yesterday. "Because I made a promise once," he said quietly, "to stand between innocents and those who would harm them. I broke that promise 3 years ago when I walked away from my badge instead of fighting harder to bring men like Thornton to justice." He met Sophia's gaze directly. "I won't break it again." A noise from the kitchen interrupted them. Noah returning with the egg basket, Sophia quickly tucked the list back into her pouch, her expression a silent promise that their conversation wasn't finished. For the rest of the day, Ethan maintained a careful watch on the surrounding land, but saw no further sign of the watcher in the trees. Still, he kept his revolver close and made sure the rifle above the door was loaded. That night, after Noah had gone to bed, Ethan sat again in the chair beside Sophia's bed. She was awake this time, propped up against pillows, her hands resting on her rounded belly. "You should sleep," she told him. "I am better." "I'll sleep later," Ethan replied. "Someone should keep watch." Sophia's gaze was penetrating in the firelight. "You were lawman before," Ethan nodded. "Border Patrol officer, then deputy sheriff in Whitewater Creek." "Why you stop?" It was a direct question, and Ethan found himself answering with unexpected honesty. "Because I couldn't uphold a law that protected the powerful and punished the weak. Because men like Thornton were above justice, and I couldn't stomach being part of a system that allowed it." Sophia considered this. "Your wife, she died same time you quit being lawman." The question was too close to truths Ethan hadn't examined connections he'd avoided making. "Around the same time," he acknowledged reluctantly. "She knew about Thornton." Ethan started to dismiss the question, then paused, memories shifting into new patterns. Sarah had been a nurse in Whitewater Creek before Noah was born. She'd treated workers from all the surrounding ranches, including the Triple T. She'd come home some nights, tight-lipped with anger over injuries she couldn't officially report. Broken arms explained away as accidents, burns attributed to carelessness. "She might have," Ethan admitted slowly. "She never said specifically, but she saw things in her work, things that troubled her." Sophia nodded as if confirming something to herself. "I think I met your wife," she said quietly. "When I was child, after soldiers attack our village." Ethan's attention sharpened. "What do you mean?" Sophia touched the silver cross hanging from the chain around Ethan's neck, Sarah's last gift to him. "Woman with this, kind woman help wounded Apache children. Speaks soft words, gentle hands." The description matched Sarah perfectly. She'd volunteered with the mission doctors who occasionally treated Native Americans despite the disapproval of many townspeople. "When I see this," Sophia continued, her finger still on the cross, "I remember her face. Same cross." Ethan felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. "When was this? When did you meet her?" "Many years ago. I was small, 7, maybe 8 summers." Sophia frowned, trying to recall. "After a big fight between soldiers and Apache. Many died, but some children brought to town. White doctor and nurse woman help us." Ethan's mind raced. There had been several skirmishes between the cavalry and Apache bands during that period, but one stood out, a particularly bloody encounter near Whitewater Creek about 12 years ago. The official report had called it a battle, but rumors suggested it had been closer to a massacre, with most of the Apache casualties being women, children, and elders. "The nurse woman, she give me this," Sophia said, pulling a small, worn pouch from beneath her shirt, different from the one that held the list. She opened it to reveal a tiny carved wooden bird. "Say it means hope. Freedom." Ethan recognized the carving instantly, one of the small tokens Sarah had often made for her patients, especially children. She'd believed that healing required more than medicine, that hope was as necessary as bandages or herbs. "That was Sarah," he confirmed, his voice rough with emotion. "My wife." Sophia's eyes filled with a mix of wonder and sadness. "Then I am right. You are sent to help me. By her spirit." Ethan couldn't bring himself to contradict her, though his rational mind rejected such mystical connections. Yet the coincidence was remarkable that Sophia, whom Sarah had helped as a child, should now seek refuge in Sarah's own home, sleep in Sarah's bed. "Get some rest," Ethan said instead of addressing her assertion. "Tomorrow we'll need to prepare for visitors. If someone is watching the ranch, they'll report back. Thornton won't be far behind." Sophia's expression hardened with determination. "I'm not afraid to fight." "In your condition, you shouldn't be fighting anyone," Ethan pointed out. "Let me handle Thornton if he comes." "My fight too," Sophia insisted. "My baby, my life." Looking at her fierce expression, Ethan was reminded again of Sarah, the same stubborn determination, the same refusal to back down when she believed she was right. Perhaps there was something to Sophia's belief in spiritual connections after all. "We'll face it together then," he conceded. "But for now, sleep. You'll need your strength." Sophia settled back against the pillows, her hands cradling her belly, as the baby moved restlessly within. "Your son," she said softly. "He is good boy, strong spirit, but sad." "He lost his mother," Ethan replied simply. "It changed him." "He talks to me," Sophia continued, "about stars. Says his mother told him stars are where good souls live after death." The memory hit Ethan with unexpected force. Sarah sitting with Noah on the porch on clear nights, pointing out constellations, telling him that the brightest stars were souls so kind and brave that God hung them in the sky as examples to us all. "Sarah believed that," Ethan acknowledged. "I'm not sure what I believe anymore." Sophia's eyes were gentle in the firelight. "Maybe not important what you believe. Important what helps Noah believe in goodness again." The simple wisdom in her words struck Ethan deeply. He'd been so caught up in his own grief, his own loss of faith, that he'd failed to see how Noah was struggling with the same questions, but without the adult understanding to process them. "You're very wise for someone so young," Ethan observed. Sophia gave a small, sad smile. "Not wise, just see much sadness already." Her hand moved over her belly in a protective caress. "I want different for my child. Better world." The quiet determination in her voice moved something in Ethan, a recognition of the same drive that had once motivated him as a lawman, the belief that he could make a difference, that justice was worth fighting for. "Get some sleep," he repeated softly. "Tomorrow comes soon enough." As Sophia's eyes drifted closed, Ethan remained in the chair, keeping watch through the night. Outside, the stars Sarah had loved so much shone in the clear desert sky, and somewhere in the darkness, Ethan knew Thornton's men were watching, waiting, planning their next move. The peaceful interlude at the Reynolds Ranch was coming to an end. Ethan could feel it in his bones, the approaching storm, the inevitable confrontation. But for the first time in 3 years, he didn't feel the numb resignation that had become his constant companion. Instead, a forgotten emotion stirred in his chest: resolve, determination. Whatever came next, he would face it standing, not kneeling in surrender to grief or injustice. He owed that much to Sarah's memory, to Noah's future, and to the brave young woman who had stumbled into their lives like an answer to a prayer neither of them had dared to voice. The next 3 days passed in a strange, suspended peace. With each passing day, the three unlikely companions grew closer, their time together bringing healing none had anticipated. Ethan maintained a vigilant watch, but no further signs of observers appeared. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were living on borrowed time, that somewhere beyond their small island of tranquility forces were gathering. On the fourth morning, Ethan woke before dawn, an inexplicable uneasiness pulling him from sleep. He checked on Noah, still peaceful in his bed, then moved to Sarah's room where Sophia slept. She too rested undisturbed, one hand curved protectively over her swollen belly, the other clutching the small wooden bird beneath her pillow. Reassured, he stepped onto the porch, breathing in the crisp pre-dawn air. The ranch lay quiet under a blanket of stars, the eastern horizon just beginning to lighten with the promise of sunrise. Nothing seemed amiss, yet the prickle of warning at the base of his skull wouldn't subside. He walked the perimeter of the house, checking doors and windows out of habit, then ventured to the stable to ensure the horses were secure. Thunder nickered softly in greeting as Ethan entered, the familiar scent of hay and horse bringing a measure of comfort. "Something's coming," Ethan murmured, stroking Thunder's velvety nose. "I can feel it." As if in response, Thunder's ears pricked forward, his attention drawn to something beyond the stable walls. A moment later, Ethan heard it too, the distant rhythm of hoofbeats, still far off but approaching steadily. Riders coming at dawn. Not travelers passing through, but men with purpose, heading directly for the Reynolds Ranch. Ethan moved swiftly, returning to the house to find Sophia already awake, standing in the kitchen with an expression of alert wariness. "They come," she said simply, no question in her voice. Ethan nodded. "3 riders, maybe 4, still a few miles out." "Is Thornton?" she asked, her hand instinctively moving to the pouch containing her father's list. "Possibly, or just the sheriff making rounds." Even as he said it, Ethan knew it wasn't true. Sheriff Camden never patrolled this far from town, and certainly not at dawn. Sophia's eyes darkened. "Not sheriff, them." She straightened her shoulders, a visible effort to gather courage. "I should leave. Draw them away from your home." "You wouldn't make it half a mile in your condition," Ethan countered, already moving to retrieve his rifle from above the door. "And I'm not sending you out there alone to face them." A small noise made them both turn. Noah stood in the hallway, sleep-tousled, but alert, his young face solemn with the understanding beyond his years. "Someone's coming, Pa," he asked quietly. Ethan hesitated, torn between protecting his son from harsh realities and preparing him for what might come. "Yes, riders approaching." Noah's gaze shifted to Sophia, then back to his father. Without being told, he moved to the window, pulling the curtain aside just enough to peer out. "I see dust. 3 horses." His voice was steady, observant, rather than frightened. Ethan felt a surge of pride mixed with sorrow. His son had grown up too fast, shaped by loss and isolation, into a watchful, serious child. Yet now there was something new in Noah's, bearing a sense of purpose that had been missing since Sarah's death. "Noah, I need you to take Sophia to the root cellar," Ethan instructed, checking that his revolver was fully loaded. "Stay there until I come for you." Noah nodded, already moving to Sophia's side, his small hand taking hers with unexpected authority. "Come on, Sophia. The cellar is safe. Pa built it strong." Sophia hesitated, looking to Ethan. "Your gun against 3 men." "I'm not planning to shoot anyone," Ethan replied, though his preparations suggested otherwise. "But I need to know you and Noah are safe while I talk to them." Understanding passed between them, an acknowledgement that Ethan was placing himself between her and danger, accepting whatever consequences might come. "Be careful," she said softly. "They are not men who listen to reason." "I've dealt with unreasonable men before," Ethan answered with grim confidence. "Now go before they get here." Noah led Sophia to the kitchen, where a trapdoor in the floor opened to reveal stone steps descending into darkness. The root cellar was small but sturdy, dug deep into the earth to store preserved foods through the winter. More importantly, it was hidden from casual observation. Only someone who knew the house well would know of its existence. "We'll be quiet as mice," Noah promised as he helped Sophia navigate the steep steps. Ethan handed them a lantern and a canteen of water. "No matter what you hear, stay down here until I come for you." "Understand." Both nodded, their faces ghostly in the lantern light. As Ethan began to close the trap door, Noah suddenly reached up, catching his father's wrist. "Pa," he said urgently, "remember what Mom always said, choose mercy when you can, but justice when you must." The words, Sarah's words quoted with perfect recall, struck Ethan like a physical blow. He'd forgotten that particular piece of his wife's wisdom, or perhaps deliberately buried it along with so many painful memories. "I remember now," he said roughly. "Be safe, son." He closed the trapdoor, covered it with a small rug that usually lay there, and moved the kitchen table back into position above it. To the casual observer, the floor appeared unbroken. Outside, the hoofbeats grew louder, no longer a distant rhythm, but an imminent arrival. Ethan checked his weapons one final time, then stepped onto the porch, rifle held casually but ready at his side. The eastern sky had brightened to pale gold, the sun not yet visible, but its light spilling across the land. Three riders crested the final rise before the ranch house, their silhouettes dark against the dawn sky. As they approached, their features became clear, confirming Ethan's worst suspicions. In the lead rode Sheriff William Holloway, his silver star catching the early light. Beside him was his deputy, Rivera, a Mexican-American officer who had joined the force after Ethan's departure. And behind them, sitting tall and imposing on a magnificent black stallion, rode Theodore Thornton himself. Ethan's jaw tightened at the sight of the rancher. Even at a distance, Thornton's presence commanded attention, his broad-shouldered frame draped in an expensive coat, his silver hair and beard impeccably groomed, his bearing that of a man accustomed to absolute authority. At 60, he looked as formidable as men half his age, with only the deep lines around his eyes and mouth suggesting the passing years. The riders reined in 20 yards from the porch, a deliberate distance, close enough for conversation, far enough for safety if guns were drawn. "Morning, Reynolds," Sheriff Holloway called, touching the brim of his hat in a gesture that fell short of respectful. Holloway had been Ethan's colleague years ago, though never a close friend. A competent lawman who preferred the path of least resistance, especially when it came to the territory's powerful ranchers. "Sheriff," Ethan acknowledged, his gaze moving between the three men. "Deputy, Mr. Thornton, what brings you to my property at this hour?" Holloway cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with his role as messenger. "We're looking for someone, Ethan, a Mexican girl young in a delicate condition. Thought she might have passed this way." Ethan's expression revealed nothing. "A lot of people pass through these parts. Why the interest in this particular girl?" Thornton urged his horse forward, impatience evident in the gesture. "Because she's a murderess, Reynolds. She killed my son." The accusation hung in the air between them. Ethan studied Thornton's face, noting the cold fury in the man's pale blue eyes, the rigid control that barely contained a volcanic rage. "Your son?" Ethan asked, feigning ignorance. "I hadn't heard about Victor." A flash of surprise crossed Thornton's features, quickly masked. "News travels slowly out here, I suppose. Victor was found dead at our ranch house 6 days ago, his skull crushed." The rancher's voice remained steady, but his hands tightened on the reins, causing his horse to sidestep nervously. "The Mexican girl, one of our servants, was missing, along with some valuable family papers." Ethan maintained a neutral expression despite the deliberate lies. Sophia had been no servant, and the valuable family papers were evidence of Thornton's crimes. "I'm sorry for your loss," Ethan said, the words formal but empty. "But I fail to see what this has to do with my ranch." Deputy Rivera spoke up, his accent slight but noticeable. "A trapper reported seeing a pregnant Mexican girl near your property line 3 days ago. Said she appeared injured." Ethan silently cursed the watcher he glimpsed at the tree line. Of course it had been someone who recognized Sophia and reported back. "If I'd seen an injured pregnant woman on my land, I'd have taken her to town for medical attention," Ethan replied evenly, as any decent man would. Thornton's expression darkened. "Are you suggesting I'm not a decent man, Reynolds?" "I'm not suggesting anything, Mr. Thornton. Just stating what I would do in such a situation." Sheriff Holloway intervened, clearly anxious to prevent the conversation from deteriorating further. "Look, Ethan, we have a warrant for the girl's arrest." He pulled a folded paper from his vest pocket. "Signed by Judge Wells. If you've seen her, you're legally obligated to tell us." Ethan's gaze fixed on the warrant. Judge Wells was another official in Thornton's pocket, the same judge who had dismissed Ethan's concerns about deaths at the Triple T Ranch 3 years ago. "May I see that warrant?" Ethan asked, extending his hand. Holloway hesitated, glancing at Thornton, who gave an imperceptible nod. The sheriff nudged his horse closer to the porch and handed over the document. Ethan unfolded it, scanning the formal language. The warrant named Sofia Diaz, a Mexican national of Apache descent, and charged her with the murder of Victor Thornton. It authorized her immediate arrest and detention pending trial. "Seems in order," Ethan acknowledged, returning the paper to Holloway. "But as I said, I haven't seen the girl." Thornton's cold eyes bored into Ethan, searching for signs of deception. "You were always a troublesome lawman, Reynolds. Too many questions, too much concern for people who don't matter." Everyone matters under the law, Mr. Thornton, Ethan replied, an echo of his former idealism surfacing unexpectedly. At least that's what the badge is supposed to mean. Thornton's lip curled in disdain. The law exists to maintain order, to protect property and progress, not to coddle thieves and murderers. Is that what you tell yourself when your workers die in accidents? The words slipped out before Ethan could stop them, fueled by 3 years of suppressed anger. A dangerous silence followed. Deputy Rivera shifted uncomfortably in his saddle, while Sheriff Holloway's face paled at Ethan's direct challenge to the most powerful man in the territory. Thornton, however, seemed almost amused. Still nursing old grievances, I see. I'd have thought losing your wife might have taught you the value of leaving well enough alone. The casual reference to Sarah sent a surge of cold rage through Ethan. His finger moved closer to the rifle's trigger, a motion not lost on Holloway, who subtly positioned his horse between the two men. We're just doing our job, Ethan, the sheriff said, placatingly. The girl is wanted for questioning in Victor's death, and, he hesitated, glancing at Thornton, and the child she carries is my grandchild. Thornton finished, his voice suddenly tight with emotion. My son's heir, the last of the Thornton line. Ethan's mind raced. If Thornton believed the baby was his grandchild, it confirmed Sophia's account of being raped by Victor. The child represented not just a familial connection for Thornton, but the continuation of his dynasty, his legacy. I understand your concern for family, Mr. Thornton, Ethan said carefully, but I still can't help you. Thornton's expression hardened. I don't think you do understand, Reynolds. That child carries my blood, my name. I will not allow it to be born to a murdering, half-breed fugitive. That's enough, Sheriff Holloway intervened, clearly uncomfortable with Thornton's language. Ethan, we need to search your property, with or without your permission. Ethan's stance shifted subtly, placing himself more directly between the riders and the house door. You have a warrant for the girl's arrest, not a warrant to search my home. Semantics, Thornton snapped. If she's here, the warrant covers finding her. The law doesn't work that way, Ethan countered, his voice hardening. Even you should know that, Thornton. Rivera, who had remained mostly silent, suddenly spoke. Sheriff, he's right. We need a separate search warrant. Holloway shot his deputy an irritated glance. I know the law, Rivera. He turned back to Ethan. We can get a search warrant by noon. Save us all some trouble and just tell us if you've seen her. And I've already answered that question, Ethan replied steadily. Thornton leaned forward in his saddle, his patience clearly exhausted. Enough of this charade. The girl is here. I can feel it. He gestured to his men. Search the house. The outbuildings, too. Before Ethan could respond, Rivera surprised them all by placing his hand on his holstered pistol. No, sir. Not without a proper warrant. Thornton's face flushed with anger. You dare to obstruct me, Mexican. I dare to uphold the law, Rivera answered quietly, his dark eyes steady despite the rancher's fury. That's what the badge means. Holloway looked torn, caught between his duty and his fear of Thornton's influence. Finally, he sighed heavily. He's right, Thornton. We do this by the book or not at all. Thornton's knuckles whitened on his reins, but he controlled himself with visible effort. Very well, get your warrant. But understand this, Reynolds. His gaze locked with Ethan's. If I find you've been harboring that girl, I'll see you prosecuted as an accessory to my son's murder. How would your boy like growing up with his father in prison? Or worse? The threat hung in the air and its implications clear. Ethan's hand tightened on his rifle, but he kept his voice level. Is that all, gentlemen? I have chores waiting. Holloway nodded, seemingly relieved that the confrontation hadn't escalated further. We'll be back, Ethan, with a proper search warrant. As the three men turned their horses, Thornton paused, his cold eyes sweeping over the modest ranch house. You know, Reynolds, I always wondered why your wife died so suddenly. Such a tragedy for a young, healthy woman to develop complications like that. The insinuation in his tone made Ethan's blood run cold. Before he could respond, Thornton continued, his voice pitched for Ethan's ears alone. She was a nurse, wasn't she? Treated many of my workers over the years. Had quite a few opinions about their injuries, I heard. Ethan felt as if the ground had tilted beneath his feet, Thornton's words confirming the terrible suspicion that had begun forming since Sophia's arrival, that Sarah's death had not been a tragic natural occurrence, but something more sinister. You'd best ride on, Ethan managed, his voice dangerously quiet. While you still can. Thornton smiled, a cold twist of lips without warmth. We'll return at noon. Have the girl ready to surrender if you're harboring her. It will go easier for everyone. He turned his horse with casual mastery and followed Holloway and Rivera down the path. Ethan remained on the porch, rifle ready, until the riders disappeared over the distant rise. Only then did he allow his rigid posture to relax, a shudder passing through him as Thornton's words echoed in his mind. Had Sarah been murdered because she knew too much, because she, like Sophia's father, had kept records of Thornton's crimes, the possibility that he had missed something so crucial, had accepted the official explanation of her death without question, sent waves of sick horror through him. Pushing aside these thoughts for the moment, Ethan returned to the kitchen and removed the rug and table covering the trapdoor. It's safe to come up now, he called down, lifting the heavy door. Noah emerged first, blinking in the comparative brightness of the kitchen. Sophia followed more slowly, her movements awkward with the weight of her advanced pregnancy. Was it him? She asked immediately, her dark eyes searching Ethan's face. Thornton. Ethan nodded grimly. Him the sheriff and a deputy named Rivera. Rivera, Sophia repeated, surprise evident in her voice. Miguel Rivera. You know him. His sister worked at Triple T Ranch. Before, she made a vague gesture. Before she run away, bad things happened to her too. This new information added another layer to the complex situation. If Deputy Rivera's sister had also suffered at the Thornton Ranch, it might explain his unexpected stand against the rancher. What did they want? Noah asked, though the answer was obvious. Ethan placed a hand on his son's shoulder. They're looking for Sophia. They have a warrant for her arrest. Noah's small face set in determined lines. You didn't tell them she's here, did you, Pa? No, son, I didn't. Good. Noah moved closer to Sophia in an instinctively protective gesture. She belongs with us now. The simple declaration, so certain, so unquestioning, caught both adults off guard. Sophia's eyes filled with sudden tears, and she placed a gentle hand on Noah's head. Thank you, Noah, she said softly. But your father right to worry. Thornton is a dangerous man. Ethan sank into a kitchen chair, the full weight of their situation settling on his shoulders. They'll be back at noon with a search warrant. We have a few hours to decide what to do. Sophia straightened her expression, resolute despite the fear visible in her eyes. I will go, before they return. Draw them away from here. You can barely walk half a mile, Ethan pointed out again. Where would you go? How would you survive? My mother's people, Sophia answered. Apaches still live in mountains. They help me. That's at least 2 days' hard ride, Ethan countered. You'd never make it alone, especially not in your condition. Then come with me, Sophia said, her gaze intense. Both of you, leave this place. The suggestion took Ethan by surprise. Leave the ranch, everything we've built. Ranch is just place, land, wood. Sophia gestured around them. Life more important. Noah more important. Noah looked between them, his young face serious. Could we go with Sophia to the Apache? Ethan ran a hand through his hair, considering the impossible choice before him. To flee meant abandoning everything he and Sarah had worked for, the home they'd built together, the last physical connection to her memory. Yet to stay meant facing Thornton's wrath, possibly endangering Noah if things turned violent. I need to think, he said, finally rising from the chair. Noah helped Sophia prepare something to eat. I'll check the horses. Outside, the morning had fully arrived, sunlight bathing the small ranch in deceptive tranquility. Ethan walked to the stable, his mind churning with possibilities and dangers, each path forward fraught with risk. Thunder greeted him with a soft nicker, sensing his master's agitation. Ethan stroked the horse's neck absently, trying to order his chaotic thoughts. What would you do, Sarah? He murmured to the empty air. What would you have me do? No answer came, of course. Only the gentle sounds of horses breathing, the distant call of a hawk circling above the pasture, the whisper of wind through the stable door. But as he stood there, Thornton's insinuation about Sarah's death returned to him, along with Sophia's revelation that she had met Sarah years ago. The connections that had seemed coincidental now took on a more ominous pattern. If Sarah had been keeping records of the injuries she treated, if she had been gathering evidence against Thornton, as Sophia's father had done, Ethan returned to the house with renewed urgency. He found Noah and Sophia at the table sharing a simple breakfast of cornbread and preserves. Sophia, Ethan said without preamble, you said you met Sarah when you were a child, after a battle between soldiers and your mother's people. Sophia nodded, setting down her spoon. Yes, I tell you this already. Was it the Black Canyon Massacre 12 years ago? Her eyes widened slightly at the name. Yes, that place. Many die there. Ethan's heart raced as pieces began falling into place. Sarah never spoke much about what happened, but she was different after those days, angry, determined to document every injury she treated at the clinic. Noah watched this exchange with growing interest. Mom kept notebooks, he offered unexpectedly, in her desk, with lists of names and injuries. Both adults turned to him in surprise. You knew about this? Ethan asked. Noah shrugged. I found them last year when I was looking for paper to draw on. I didn't understand all the words, but they had dates and names, like a diary, but not about her. Ethan felt a sudden urgent need to see these notebooks. If Sarah had been documenting injuries that might implicate Thornton, if she had evidence that paralleled Sophia's father's list. Show me Noah. The boy led them to Sarah's small desk in the corner of the living room, another piece of furniture Ethan had avoided since her death. Noah opened the bottom drawer and reached into the back, pulling out 3 leather-bound notebooks. Here, he said, offering them to his father. Mom said these were important, that someday they might help people who couldn't help themselves. Ethan took the notebooks with a sense of reverence mixed with dread. Sarah's neat handwriting filled the pages, clinical observations, names, dates, descriptions of injuries, and most damning of all, the suspected actual causes noted in the margins. Jose Ramirez, 40 broken arm, claims fell from horse. Note, defensive fracture pattern consistent with warding off blows. Third such injury from Triple T this month. Maria Vasquez, 16 burns to back and shoulders. Employer claims kitchen accident. Note pattern suggests deliberate application of heated metal. T-shaped brand visible on left shoulder. Page after page of similar entries spanning several years. Sarah had been methodically documenting a pattern of abuse long before Ethan had begun his official investigation. The final entry, dated just 2 weeks before her death, made Ethan's blood run cold. Met with Miguel Diaz today. He has similar records of workers' deaths at Triple T. We'll combine our evidence and take to federal marshal next month. T's influence too strong locally for justice. Miguel Diaz, Sophia's father. Sarah had been working with him gathering evidence against Thornton, and both had died before they could bring that evidence to light. My father speak of nurse woman, Sophia said softly, reading over Ethan's shoulder. Say she brave good heart. Help him write down names in English. Ethan closed the notebook, his hands shaking slightly. Sarah died 2 weeks after this entry. The doctor said it was complications from childbirth, but he couldn't finish the sentence, the implications too horrific to voice in front of Noah. Sophia understood nonetheless. Thornton, she said simply. He poisoned many who stand against him. My father suspect this but could not prove. Noah looked between them, confusion and growing alarm on his young face. What does it mean, Pa, about Mom? Ethan knelt to his son's level, placing his hands gently on Noah's shoulders. It means your mother was even braver than we knew, son. She was trying to help people who were being hurt, to bring them justice. And the bad men hurt her for it. Noah's voice was small but steady, already forming the terrible conclusion. Ethan hesitated, unwilling to burden his son with such knowledge, yet unable to lie to him. I don't know for certain, Noah, but it's possible. Noah absorbed this, his expression shifting from confusion to a solemn determination that seemed too old for his young face. Then we have to finish what Mom started. We have to help Sophia and make the bad men pay. The simple, childish justice in Noah's statement struck Ethan to the core. Out of the mouth of babes, Sarah would have said, quoting scripture, as she often did when faced with profound truth. It's not that simple, son, Ethan began, but Sophia interrupted. He right, she said firmly. We must finish what they start. For justice, for your wife, for my father. Her hand moved to her belly. For my child. Ethan met her gaze directly, his decision already made. Because it's time I honored the promise I once made to Sarah, to myself, to the badge I wore. This time I won't walk away. All right, he said, his decision crystallizing. But we don't run. We fight intelligently, legally. We use the evidence Sarah and your father gathered, combined with your testimony, Sophia. We take it not to the local law, but to the federal marshal in Tucson. Thornton will come first, Sophia pointed out, with sheriff, with warrant, before we can leave. Let them come, Ethan replied, a plan forming in his mind. We'll have a different reception, waiting than they expect. As noon approached, Ethan completed his preparations. The notebooks and Sophia's list were carefully hidden in a compartment beneath the floorboards, a secret space Sarah had insisted on when they built the house, saying every home needed hiding places for treasures. The irony that her own evidence would be concealed there was not lost on Ethan. Noah and Sophia remained in the root cellar, supplied with water, food, and blankets. This time Ethan had added a small pistol placed in Sophia's hands despite her initial protests. I pray you won't need it, he had told her, but if someone opens that trap door, and it's not me, you protect yourself and Noah. Now Ethan sat on the porch, outwardly calm, his rifle across his knees. The sun had reached its zenith, the harsh Arizona light bleaching color from the landscape. In the distance, a dust cloud announced the approach of riders, more than 3 this time, perhaps 6 or 7 in total. Ethan felt strangely peaceful, his course set. For 3 years he had existed in a fog of grief and resignation, going through the motions of living without purpose or passion. Now, with clarity born of revelation and resolve, he felt fully alive again, alert, focused, determined. The riders came into view, Sheriff Holloway and Deputy Rivera at the front, Thornton just behind them, and 4 ranch hands bringing up the rear. Thornton's private enforcers, men known throughout the territory for their ruthlessness. Ethan remained seated as the group reined in before the porch, the same 20-yard distance as before, now feeling more explicitly like a standoff. Afternoon, gentlemen, he called, his tone deceptively pleasant. I see you brought reinforcements. Sheriff Holloway shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. We have the search warrant, Ethan. He extended a folded paper. Signed by Judge Wells, authorizes us to search your property for Sophia Diaz. Ethan made no move to take the document. I assume you've come to do more than search, given your companions. He nodded toward Thornton's men, each visibly armed with rifle and pistol. Just a precaution, Thornton responded smoothly. The girl is dangerous after all. She killed my son. Did she, Ethan asked, his gaze steady, or did Victor Thornton die attempting to destroy evidence of your crimes, Mr. Thornton? A tense silence followed this direct accusation. Thornton's eyes narrowed while Sheriff Holloway looked from one man to the other with growing alarm. What are you implying, Reynolds? Thornton demanded, his voice dangerously soft. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. Ethan's hand moved to his shirt pocket, withdrawing a folded paper, a copy of one page from Sarah's notebook, listing several suspicious deaths at the Triple T Ranch. My wife kept records, Thornton. Detailed, dated records of the injuries she treated workers from your ranch with broken bones, burns, whip marks. People who later turned up dead from accidents. Thornton's face remained impassive, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. Your wife was an imaginative woman, it seems, prone to unfortunate theories. Theories supported by evidence, Ethan countered. Evidence she was compiling with Miguel Diaz before they both died unexpectedly. Deputy Rivera straightened in his saddle at the mention of Diaz's name, his gaze suddenly more intense. Sheriff Holloway looked increasingly uncomfortable, his eyes darting between Thornton and Ethan as if watching a fuse burn toward dynamite. These are serious accusations, Ethan, Holloway said cautiously. Not related to our purpose here today. Aren't they? Ethan rose slowly from his chair, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening despite the rifle in his hands. Sofia Diaz witnessed her father's murder. She possesses his records of deaths at the Triple T. Victor Thornton attempted to destroy those records, and in the struggle, he died. Now Theodore Thornton wants her silenced and her unborn child claimed as a Thornton heir, regardless of how it was conceived. Thornton's facade of civility cracked fury flashing in his pale eyes. You go too far, Reynolds. These fantasies won't prevent us from executing a legal warrant. It's not the warrant I object to, Ethan replied evenly. It's the intent behind it. You're not interested in justice for your son Thornton. You want to eliminate a witness and seize a child you consider property. One of Thornton's men moved his hand toward his holster, but Thornton raised a hand stopping him. Careful, Reynolds. Accusations without proof can be costly. I have proof, Ethan stated flatly. Sarah's notebooks, Sophia's testimony, the list her father compiled. Enough to interest a federal marshal, I'd wager. Sheriff Holloway cleared his throat. Let's all calm down. We have a legal warrant to serve, and that's all we're here to do today. He turned to Ethan. Will you allow us to search your property, or do we need to force the issue? Ethan considered his options. Direct confrontation would likely end badly. He was outnumbered and outgunned. But surrender wasn't in his plan either. I'll allow the search, he conceded finally. You and Deputy Rivera only. Thornton and his men stay outside. Thornton began to protest, but Sheriff Holloway raised a hand. That's fair. This is official law business, not private. He dismounted, gesturing for Rivera to do the same. We'll be thorough but respectful, Ethan. I give you my word. Ethan nodded, stepping aside to allow the two lawmen to enter the house. As they passed, he noted Rivera's almost imperceptible nod, a signal of, what understanding solidarity. It was impossible to tell. Left alone with Thornton and his men, Ethan maintained his position on the porch rifle held ready, but not aimed. Thornton dismounted, moving closer, but still maintaining a cautious distance. You're making a mistake, Reynolds, Thornton said quietly. One that will cost you everything you have. I made my mistake 3 years ago, Ethan replied. When I walked away instead of fighting, I'm correcting it now. Thornton studied him with cold calculation. Your wife had the same misplaced idealism, the same inability to understand how the world actually works. It didn't end well for her. The casual confirmation of Ethan's worst fears that Sarah's death had been deliberate sent a wave of rage through him, nearly overwhelming his self-control. Only the knowledge that Noah and Sophia were depending on him kept his finger from tightening on the trigger. Was it worth it, Thornton? He asked instead, his voice deadly quiet. Killing a nurse, a healer, because she knew too much. Orphaning a 7-year-old boy. What kind of monster does that? Something unexpected flickered across Thornton's face. Not remorse precisely, but a shadow of something darker, more complex. The kind who's lost everything that mattered, he answered, his voice suddenly hollow. The kind who's watched his own wife and child butchered by Apache raiders. The statement caught Ethan off guard. He'd heard rumors, of course, that Thornton had lost family decades ago, but the man never spoke of it. Does that justify what you've done? Ethan demanded. Torturing workers, seizing land, murdering those who stand in your way. Civilization requires strength, Thornton replied, his voice hardening again. The weak perish, the strong survive and build. Everything I've done to build something lasting, a legacy that will endure long after I'm gone. A legacy built on blood and suffering. Thornton shrugged, unmoved. History is written by the victors, Reynolds. In 50 years, no one will remember how the Thornton Empire was built. They'll only see its greatness. Before Ethan could respond, the door opened behind him. Sheriff Holloway emerged, followed by Rivera. The house is clear, Holloway announced. No sign of the girl. Thornton's eyes narrowed with suspicion. Check the outbuildings, the stable, every possible hiding place. For the next hour, the search continued. Holloway and Rivera methodically examined each structure on the property, while Ethan watched Thornton and his men with unwavering vigilance. The trapdoor to the root cellar remained undiscovered, hidden beneath the rug and kitchen table where Holloway had sat to rest briefly during the search. Finally, the sheriff returned to the porch, wiping sweat from his brow. She's not here, Thornton. Reynolds was telling the truth. Thornton's expression darkened with anger and disbelief. Impossible. The trapper saw her here. Maybe she moved on, Rivera suggested. Or maybe she was never here at all. Trappers aren't known for their reliability. Thornton stared at the deputy, clearly suspecting something amiss, but unable to prove it. Check again, he ordered. The house especially. We've been thorough, Holloway insisted, a note of impatience entering his voice. The warrant doesn't give us the right to tear the place apart. A tense silence followed Thornton's fury, almost palpable in the hot afternoon air. Finally, he turned to Ethan, his voice tight with controlled rage. This isn't over, Reynolds. The girl is out there somewhere, and I will find her. When I do, anyone who helped her will pay dearly. Ethan met his gaze steadily. Seems to me you're the one who should be worried, Thornton. Evidence has a way of surfacing even after years. Thornton's cold smile held no humor. Evidence can burn. Witnesses can disappear. You of all people should understand that by now. He turned to his men. We're leaving. As the group mounted their horses, Deputy Rivera lingered behind, ostensibly adjusting his saddle. When the others had moved a short distance away, he turned to Ethan, speaking quickly and quietly. Be careful, Reynolds. Thornton suspects you're hiding something. He won't give up easily. Ethan studied the young deputy with new interest. Why are you telling me this? Rivera's dark eyes held a mix of anger and determination. My sister was at the Triple T for 6 months. What they did to her? He shook his head, unable to continue. I took the badge to find justice for her and others like her. But the law here is compromised. Your sister, Ethan asked, is she safe now? Mexico, Rivera replied, with cousins in Sonora. She made it out alive, but not, he paused, not whole. Understanding passed between the men, a shared knowledge of Thornton's cruelty, a shared determination to see justice done. Sheriff's getting suspicious, Rivera murmured, glancing toward Holloway. If you have the girl, get her to safety soon. Thornton has men watching the roads. Before Ethan could respond, Rivera mounted his horse and rejoined the others. The group rode away, Thornton's rigid back and squared shoulders, radiating fury and promise of retribution. Ethan waited until they were well out of sight before returning to the kitchen. He moved the table and rug, then opened the trap door to the root cellar. It's safe now, he called down. They're gone. Noah emerged first, blinking in the sudden brightness. Sophia followed more slowly, the pistol still clutched in her hand, her expression tense with fear and determination. They found nothing, she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Nothing, Ethan confirmed. The sheriff and Deputy Rivera searched, but they didn't look too hard. Rivera, Sophia said thoughtfully, he help us. I think he might. His sister was at the Triple T too, apparently. She escaped to Mexico. Sophia nodded, unsurprised. Many girls taken there, few escape. Noah moved to the window, peering out cautiously. Will the bad men come back, Pa? Eventually, Ethan answered honestly. Thornton won't give up easily. But we have a small advantage now. They think you are not here, Sophia. That gives us some time to plan our next move. What is next move? Sophia asked, easing herself into a chair, one hand supporting her lower back. Her pregnancy was advancing, the child's arrival perhaps only weeks away. Ethan considered their options. We need to get Sarah's notebooks and your father's list to the federal marshal in Tucson. With both sets of evidence and your testimony, there might be enough to bring charges against Thornton. Tucson far, Sophia observed. Many days travel. Baby comes soon. The reality of her condition complicated matters significantly. A woman in her final month of pregnancy couldn't travel quickly, especially not over rough terrain. Yet remaining at the ranch grew more dangerous with each passing day. We could split up, Ethan suggested reluctantly. I could take the evidence to Tucson while you and Noah stay hidden here. No, Noah interrupted firmly. We stay together. Mom always said family stays together in trouble. Sophia nodded in agreement. Noah right. Together safer. Thornton have many men, many eyes. Alone easier to catch. Ethan recognized the wisdom in their argument, though it made their situation more complex. Then we need another plan. A safe place for you until after the baby comes somewhere Thornton won't think to look. My mother's people, Sophia suggested again. Apache and mountains. They help. That's at least 3 days travel in your condition, Ethan pointed out. And how would we find them? The Army has pushed most Apache bands deep into the most remote areas. Sophia's expression grew distant, as if recalling memories from long ago. I know places, secret places where soldiers never find. My mother showed me when I small. Even if we could find them, how do we know they'd help us? They have no reason to trust white settlers. They trust me, Sophia replied simply. I am daughter of their daughter, and you? She hesitated, studying Ethan's face. You have saved me, given me shelter. They will see this. Ethan wasn't convinced, but their options were limited. Remaining at the ranch meant eventual discovery. Traveling to Tucson meant exposure on open roads, where Thornton's men would be watching. The Apache strongholds in the mountains offered at least a possibility of temporary refuge. We'll leave tonight, he decided finally, under cover of darkness. We'll take only what we can carry on horseback. Noah's eyes widened. Leave everything else behind forever. Ethan placed a hand on his son's shoulder. Not forever, Noah. Just until it's safe. Until we've done what your mother and Sophia's father started, brought truth to light, justice to those who deserve it. The boy nodded solemnly, accepting this difficult reality with the same resilience he'd shown since Sarah's death. I'll pack Mom's Bible, he said decisively. And her picture. Good thinking, son. Ethan turned to Sophia. Can you ride? We have a gentle mare that could carry you. Sophia nodded confidently. I ride since childhood. Apache children learn before walking. Then we prepare, Ethan said, his decision firm. Food, water, weapons, the evidence, only essentials. We leave at moonrise. As Noah and Sophia began gathering supplies, Ethan stepped outside, scanning the horizon with new awareness. The peaceful isolation that had drawn him to this place 3 years ago now felt like vulnerability exposure. Thornton would return perhaps as soon as tomorrow, with more men and fewer pretenses of legality. The sun hung low in the western sky, painting the landscape in shades of gold and crimson. Soon darkness would fall, providing the cover they needed for escape. Ethan found himself studying the distant mountains, rugged, forbidding peaks that had long represented danger in the settler mind. Now those same mountains offered the possibility of sanctuary, at least for a time. He returned to the house to find Noah carefully wrapping Sarah's portrait in a soft cloth. The boy's movements were deliberate, reverent, a child handling the most precious thing he possessed. Mom would understand, wouldn't she? Noah asked without looking up, about leaving the ranch. Ethan knelt beside his son, helping him secure the wrapped portrait in a saddlebag. She would. Your mother cared about people, not places. She'd say home is wherever we're together, safe and doing what's right. Noah nodded, seemingly comforted by this assurance. Will we ever come back? It was a question Ethan had been asking himself. The ranch represented years of hard work, the dream he and Sarah had built together. Abandoning it felt like another kind of failure, another loss. I hope so, son, he answered honestly. But even if we don't, we'll build something new, something good. From the doorway, Sophia watched their interaction with quiet understanding. Her hand rested protectively over her swollen belly, the child within active, now pressing visibly against the fabric of her borrowed dress. New beginnings come from endings, she said softly. My mother teach this. Circle of life, never break, only change. The simple wisdom in her words resonated with something deep in Ethan's spirit, a truth he'd forgotten in his years of grief and isolation. Life continued, changed, renewed itself even after the most devastating losses. Sarah was gone, but her legacy lived on in Noah, in the evidence she'd gathered in the quest for justice she'd begun. And now, unexpectedly, in this young woman who had stumbled into their lives like an answer to an unspoken prayer, bringing danger but also purpose, awakening in both father and son emotions they had thought long buried. As the sun disappeared behind the distant mountains, casting long shadows across the land, Ethan Reynolds made final preparations for their journey. Whatever awaited them, danger, hardship, uncertainty, they would face it together, three unlikely companions bound by shared purpose and growing affection. The mission Sarah had begun would be completed. The truth would be told. Justice would be served. And perhaps in the process, healing would come to three wounded souls who had found each other in the vast, unforgiving wilderness of the Arizona territory. The moon rose full and bright over the desert, casting the landscape in silver and shadow. Ethan checked the horses one final time. Thunder for himself, the gentle mare Willow for Sophia, and Noah's pony Dust. Each animal carried saddlebags filled with essentials, food, water, ammunition, warm clothes, and most crucially, the evidence against Thornton Sarah's notebooks and Sophia's father's list wrapped carefully in oilcloth to protect against the elements. Inside the house, Sophia stood by the window, her silhouette outlined against the moonlight. She wore Sarah's old riding clothes modified to accommodate her pregnancy and a heavy woolen shawl against the night chill. Despite her condition, she carried herself with a straight-backed dignity that spoke of inner strength. Are you sure you can make this journey? Ethan asked quietly, coming to stand beside her. Sophia nodded, her gaze fixed on the distant mountains that would be their refuge. I have no choice, she replied simply. For my child, I find strength. Noah joined them, carrying the last of their provisions. At 10 years old, he seemed suddenly older, his young face solemn with understanding beyond his years. He had changed in the few days since Sophia's arrival, speaking more, smiling occasionally, showing flashes of the bright, curious child he had been before Sarah's death. I'm ready, Pa, he announced, hefting his small pack with determination. Ethan surveyed the home they were leaving behind, the house he and Sarah had built with their own hands, the life they had carved from the wilderness. 3 years of memories, both joyful and painful, resided within these walls. There was no guarantee they would ever return. We should say goodbye, Noah suggested, his voice small but steady. Ethan glanced at his son, touched by the sentiment. You're right, a proper goodbye. They walked through the house one last time, Noah pausing in each room as if committing it to memory. In the kitchen, he touched the table where they had shared countless meals. In the small study, he ran his fingers along the spines of his mother's books. Finally, they reached Sarah's room where Sophia had slept these past days. Noah entered first, moving to the bedside table where Sarah's hairbrush still lay. He picked it up carefully, removing a single strand of auburn hair that remained tangled in the bristles. So I'll always have a piece of her with me, he explained, tucking the strand into a small leather pouch he wore around his neck, a birthday gift from Sarah years ago. Sophia watched from the doorway, her dark eyes glistening with unspoken emotion. Your mother, very special woman, she said softly. Her spirit strong in this house. In you. Ethan felt a tightness in his throat as he observed his son's ritual of farewell. For 3 years, he had preserved this room as a shrine to his grief, untouched and unchanging. Yet in the few days since Sophia's arrival, something had shifted. The space felt alive again, serving its purpose as shelter and comfort rather than a mausoleum to what was lost. Sarah would want us to go, he said, as much to himself as to Noah and Sophia. She'd say the fight for justice matters more than a house or land. Noah nodded, replacing the brush exactly as he had found it. We're taking her with us anyway, he said with childish certainty. Not just her picture. Her. Ethan placed a hand on his son's shoulder, unable to speak, past the lump in his throat. He had no easy answers about the afterlife, about whether Sarah's spirit could indeed accompany them on their dangerous journey. But Noah's simple faith provided its own kind of comfort. Time to leave, Sophia reminded them gently, one hand supporting her lower back as the baby shifted within her. Outside, the night had deepened, stars scattered across the vast expanse of sky like diamond dust. Ethan helped Sophia mount Willow, adjusting the stirrups to accommodate her condition. Noah climbed confidently onto Dust, his small face set in determined lines. With a final glance at the ranch house, a pale shape against the darkness, they rode out heading east toward the distant mountains. They traveled in silence for the first hour, keeping to game trails and dry creek beds to avoid the main roads where Thornton's men might be watching. Ethan led the way, constantly scanning their surroundings, alert to any sign of pursuit. Sophia followed, her body swaying in natural rhythm with her horse's movements despite her advanced pregnancy. Noah brought up the rear, occasionally turning to look back at the diminishing silhouette of the only home he remembered. The desert night was alive with sounds, the soft hooting of an owl, the distant yip of coyotes, the whisper of wind through sage and mesquite. Above them, the moon sailed through scattered clouds, alternately illuminating their path and plunging them into darkness. How far to Apache land? Ethan asked when they paused to rest the horses. Sophia pointed toward a jagged peak silhouetted against the starry sky. Beyond that mountain, 2 days, maybe 3. She shifted uncomfortably, one hand moving to support her belly. Ethan noticed the gesture with concern. How are you holding up? Baby restless, she answered with a small smile. Not like riding. We'll rest properly once we're farther from the ranch, Ethan promised. Can you continue for a few more hours? Sophia nodded, her expression resolute. For safety, I can. They remounted and continued eastward, the terrain gradually changing as they left the open desert for the foothills of the mountain range. Pine and juniper replaced mesquite and cactus, the air growing cooler with the increasing elevation. By dawn, they had covered nearly 15 miles, a respectable distance, considering Sophia's condition and the need for caution. Ethan selected a small clearing, sheltered by pines, for their day camp. With the sun rising, travel became more dangerous. They would be visible for miles across the open landscape. Better to rest during daylight and continue their journey under a cover of darkness. We'll stay here until sunset, he announced, helping Sophia dismount. She moved stiffly, her face drawn with fatigue, though she made no complaint. Noah gathered branches for a small, smokeless fire, while Ethan tended the horses, removing their saddles and securing them to low-hanging branches with enough lead to graze. Sophia eased herself down onto a fallen log, exhaling slowly as she stretched her back. I make tea, she offered, reaching for her saddlebag. Good for strength. My mother teach me. From a small leather pouch, she produced a mixture of dried herbs and bark. The fragrance that rose from the brewing tea was unfamiliar to Ethan, earthy and slightly sweet with a hint of mint. What's in it? Noah asked curiously, watching the process with interest. Pine needle, sage, juniper berry, Sophia replied, stirring the pot with a stick. Medicine for pregnant women. Give strength for journey. She poured the tea into 3 cups fashioned from hollowed gourds, offering them first to Ethan and Noah before taking her own. The liquid was fragrant and warming, with a complex flavor that was not unpleasant despite its medicinal purpose. As they sipped their tea, the rising sun painted the eastern sky in shades of gold and crimson. Birds called from the surrounding trees, and a gentle breeze stirred the pine needles overhead. In another context, it might have been a peaceful morning on a family camping expedition. Do you think they've discovered we're gone yet? Noah asked, breaking the silence. Ethan considered the question. Probably not. Thornton might send men to watch the ranch today, but they're likely under orders to observe, not approach. It could be tomorrow before they realize we've fled. And then they follow, Sophia stated matter-of-factly. Yes, Ethan agreed. They'll follow, but they'll expect us to head for Tucson or the border. The mountains. He glanced at the rugged peaks surrounding them. The mountains won't be their first guess. Sophia's expression remained skeptical. Thornton clever. He know I have Apache blood. Maybe he think of mountains. Ethan couldn't discount this possibility. Theodore Thornton had survived and thrived in this harsh territory for decades, building his empire through cunning as much as cruelty. Underestimating him would be dangerous. We'll be careful, Ethan assured her. Keep to hidden trails, travel by night when possible. And once we reach your mother's people, if they'll have us, we'll be safer. They will help, Sophia said with quiet certainty. For my mother's sake. For unborn child. Noah, who had been listening intently, asked, will they help us because of what happened to their village? The massacre you talked about. Sophia's expression softened as she regarded the boy. Yes, Black Canyon was great sadness for Apache. Many die, women, children. Her gaze shifted to Ethan. Soldiers say Apache attack settlers. Not true. Thornton men dressed like Apache raid ranches kill families. Make soldiers angry, make them attack Apache village. Ethan felt a chill, despite the warming day. Thornton orchestrated the massacre. Why Prono? Land, Sophia replied simply. Apache land have water, good soil. After massacre, survivors forced to reservation. Thornton claimed land. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. The Black Canyon massacre had occurred shortly after Thornton began expanding his ranch holdings dramatically. The territory papers had praised him for developing land that had been unproductive in Apache hands. That's why Sarah was documenting everything, Ethan realized aloud. She treated the survivors. She knew the truth. Sophia nodded. Your wife, good woman, see truth when others blind. And Thornton killed her for it, Noah said flatly, his young voice hardened by the harsh reality of their situation. Ethan wanted to soften this truth for his son's sake, to offer some alternative explanation, but he couldn't bring himself to lie. I believe he did, Noah, or ordered it done, which amounts to the same thing. Noah absorbed this, his small face solemn. Then we have to make sure everybody knows what he did. Stosoin. To the Apache people, to Sophia's father, to Mom. We have to tell the truth. We will, son, Ethan promised, reaching out to squeeze Noah's shoulder. That's exactly what we're going to do. Sophia, watching their exchange, suddenly stiffened her head, turning sharply toward the west. Listen, she whispered. Ethan fell silent, straining to hear whatever had alarmed her. At first there was nothing but the usual forest sounds, birds whined the soft nickering of their horses. Then he caught it, the distant but unmistakable rhythm of hoofbeats. Multiple horses moving at a steady trot. Riders, he confirmed, already moving to extinguish their small fire. Coming from the direction of the ranch. Thornton's men, Noah asked, his voice barely audible. Most likely, Ethan quickly gathered their belongings, shoving them into saddlebags. They've discovered we're gone sooner than I expected. How they find our trail so fast? Sophia wondered, struggling to her feet. Ethan had been asking himself the same question. They had been careful, avoiding obvious paths, leaving minimal signs of their passage. Unless someone was watching the ranch, he realized grimly. They saw us leave and followed at a distance. There was no time for further speculation. The hoofbeats were growing louder, still distant, perhaps a mile away but approaching steadily. They needed to move, and quickly. Can you ride? Ethan asked Sophia, noting the fatigue evident in her face despite their brief rest. She nodded determinedly. I ride. Within minutes, they had saddled the horses and erased most signs of their camp. Ethan helped Sophia mount Willow, then lifted Noah onto Dust. The boy's face was pale but composed, showing none of the panic that might be expected from a child in such dangerous circumstances. Head east, deeper into the mountains, Ethan instructed, pointing toward a narrow game trail that wound through the pines. I'll follow behind and try to obscure our tracks. You come soon, Sophia insisted, concern evident in her dark eyes. I'll be right behind you, he promised. Now go. Sophia nudged Willow forward, Noah following close behind on Dust. Ethan watched them disappear among the trees before mounting Thunder and moving in a different direction, a simple misdirection tactic that might buy them precious time. He rode west for a quarter-mile deliberately, leaving clear tracks, then doubled back using a rocky stream bed that would show minimal signs of passage. It was a basic frontier technique, one that experienced trackers might see through, but it could delay pursuit long enough for Sophia and Noah to gain distance. When he rejoined their trail, Ethan was dismayed to find that Sophia and Noah had progressed more slowly than he'd hoped. Sophia rode hunched forward slightly, one hand braced against the saddle horn, her face tight with discomfort. Are you all right? Ethan asked, bringing Thunder alongside Willow. Sophia straightened with visible effort. Just pain. Normal for late pregnancy. Ethan wasn't convinced. Sarah had experienced similar discomfort in the weeks before Noah's birth, what the doctor had called practice pains. But Sophia was further along than Sarah had been her baby, due in perhaps 2 weeks, maybe less. We need to find better shelter, he decided. Somewhere defensible where you can rest properly. Noah, riding slightly ahead, called back excitedly. Pa, there's a cabin or something up ahead. Ethan tensed, immediately wary. An occupied cabin could mean help or additional danger. Stay back, Noah. Let me check it out. He rode forward cautiously, rifle ready across his saddle. Through the trees, a small structure came into view. Not a proper cabin, but a crude miner's shack, long abandoned, judging by the sagging roof and door hanging askew on leather hinges. The small clearing surrounding it was overgrown with young pines and mountain grasses, suggesting no one had lived there for years. Ethan dismounted and approached on foot, alert for any sign of recent occupation. The interior of the shack was dusty and bare, except for a rough wooden platform that had once served as a bed, a small stone fireplace, and a three-legged stool missing most of its seat. Satisfied that the place was truly abandoned, Ethan returned to Sophia and Noah. It's an old prospector's shelter, he reported. Not comfortable, but it's shelter and well hidden from the trail. We can rest there while I scout our back trail. Sophia nodded gratefully, her fatigue evident in the slump of her shoulders. Ethan helped her dismount and supported her as they made their way to the shack, Noah following with armfuls of their bedrolls. Inside, Ethan cleared the debris from the sleeping platform, while Noah gathered pine boughs to create a softer surface. Sophia sank onto this makeshift bed with a sigh of relief, stretching her legs out before her. "I will be fine," she assured them, noting Ethan's concerned expression. "Just need rest." "I'll stay with her, Pa," Noah offered, setting Sarah's Bible on the rough-hewn windowsill. "I can read to her like I did at home." Ethan squeezed his son's shoulder, grateful for the boy's steady composure in the face of danger. "Good man. I won't be long, just going to check our back trail and make sure our tracks are properly obscured." Outside, he secured the horses in a small copse of pines behind the shack, where they would be hidden from casual observation. Then moving quietly through the forest, Ethan backtracked along their route, at all senses alert for signs of pursuit. He hadn't gone more than half a mile when he heard voices. Men's voices, harsh with frustration and urgency. Crouching behind a fallen log, Ethan observed 4 riders examining the ground where he had deliberately left tracks before doubling back. "Trail goes this way," one man insisted, pointing westward. "Clear as day." Another rider, whom Ethan recognized as Jackson Thornton's foreman, shook his head. "Too clear. Reynolds was a scout before he was a lawman. He knows better than to leave tracks a blind man could follow." The foreman dismounted, examining the area more carefully. "It's a false trail. They doubled back somewhere." Ethan felt a chill of recognition. Jackson was right. The misdirection wouldn't fool him for long. And once they found the real trail, they would follow it straight to the abandoned shack where Sophia and Noah waited. Moving with practiced stealth, Ethan retreated, circling wide to avoid leaving fresh signs. He needed to return to the shack, gather Sophia and Noah, and move deeper into the mountains before Thornton's men discovered their actual path. As he approached the clearing, however, a sound froze him in place, a low moan of pain quickly stifled. It came from inside the shack, unmistakably Sophia's voice. Ethan rushed the remaining distance, bursting through the crooked door, to find Sophia sitting upright on the pine bough bed, her face contorted with pain, one hand clutching Noah's while the other cradled her swollen belly. "The baby," Noah said, looking up at his father with wide, frightened eyes. "It's coming." Sophia shook her head as the contraction eased her breathing, steadying. "Not yet, just strong pains, warning pains." But Ethan had seen this before with Sarah. He recognized the pattern, the rhythmic tightening of muscles, the instinctive bracing against pain, the momentary relief between contractions. These weren't warning pains. Labor had begun. "How long between?" he asked, kneeling beside her. "Not sure, not very close, maybe 15 minutes. She attempted a reassuring smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Still time. Baby not come for hours yet." Hours they didn't have. Thornton's men were less than an hour behind them and closing fast. Moving Sophia now in active labor would be dangerous for both her and the child. Staying meant being found and facing 4 armed men with only himself as defender. "Noah, get fresh water from the stream," Ethan instructed, making a swift decision. "And gather more pine boughs. Make the bed as comfortable as possible." As Noah hurried to obey, Ethan turned back to Sophia. "We can't move you now. It's too risky for the baby. But Thornton's men are close 4 riders, including his foreman, Jackson. They'll find us soon." Sophia's dark eyes met his, understanding the implications immediately. "You must go," she said firmly. "Take Noah. Take evidence. Get to federal marshal." "I'm not leaving you here alone to face them," Ethan replied, equally firm. "Not in your condition." "Better one captured than all," she argued. "My baby and I valuable to Thornton. He not kill us. You and Noah." She shook her head. "No value except revenge." Ethan couldn't deny her logic. Thornton wanted Sophia alive, and her child even more so. But he and Noah represented only obstacles to be eliminated. Still, the thought of abandoning her to face capture alone was unthinkable. "There must be another way," he insisted, mind racing through possibilities. "Perhaps I could lead them away, create a diversion, while Noah stays with you." Sophia began to respond, then tensed as another contraction seized her. This one seemed stronger than the last, her fingers gripping the edge of the platform until her knuckles whitened. When it passed, she exhaled slowly, her decision clearly made. "No, too dangerous for Noah alone. You both go, now before they find trail." Her voice softened. "I survive, Ethan, always survive, and find you after baby come." Noah returned with a canteen of fresh water and an armful of pine branches. The boy's expression was solemn but determined as he arranged the greenery to create a more comfortable surface for Sophia. "Did you hear riders, Pa?" he asked, his young voice steady, despite the fear that must have been churning inside him. 4 men about an hour behind us," Ethan confirmed, seeing no reason to shield his son from the truth of their situation. "Sophia thinks we should go take the evidence to the marshal while she stays here." Noah's response was immediate and vehement. "No, we can't leave her. Mom would never leave someone who needed help." The simple childish certainty in his voice struck Ethan deeply. Sarah wouldn't have abandoned someone vulnerable regardless of the personal risk. How could he do less, especially now, when Sophia needed them most? "You're right, son," he acknowledged, making his decision. "We stay together. Relief washed over Sophia's face, though whether from Ethan's words or the passing of another contraction, he couldn't tell. Then we prepare, she said pragmatically, for baby, for fight. Ethan nodded, mind already shifting to defensive considerations. The shack offered minimal protection. Its walls were solid logs but riddled with chinks and gaps. The single door and window created unavoidable points of vulnerability. Still, with proper preparation, it could be defended at least long enough to what Ethan forced himself to confront the harsh reality of their situation. They were outnumbered with a woman in labor and a child to protect. Even if he managed to hold off Thornton's men initially, they could simply wait them out or return with reinforcements. First, we make you more comfortable, he told Sophia, pushing these grim thoughts aside for the moment. Then I'll see about strengthening our position. For the next hour, they worked with quiet efficiency. Ethan repaired the worst gaps in the walls, while Noah gathered additional pine boughs for bedding and filled every container they had with fresh water. Sophia, between increasingly frequent contractions, tore strips from a spare shirt to create bandages and prepared a poultice of herbs from her small medicine pouch. For after baby come, she explained, grinding the mixture with a smooth stone, stop bleeding. Ethan checked and rechecked their weapons, his rifle and revolver, Sophia's small pistol, and the hunting knife he always carried. Limited ammunition would be their greatest weakness in a prolonged confrontation. As the afternoon sun slanted through the single grimy window, Sophia's labor intensified. Her contractions came closer together, each one seeming to drain more of her strength. She remained stoic, refusing to cry out even as the pain clearly mounted, but Ethan could see the fear in her eyes, not for herself, but for her child about to enter the world in circumstances far from ideal. You're doing well, he assured her, dampening a cloth to wipe her forehead. The baby is strong. I can see it moving even between contractions. Sophia managed a smile that was more grimace than expression of joy. Strong like mother, she agreed, then gasped as another contraction began. Noah sat beside her, holding her hand with surprising composure for a 10-year-old boy. He had been quiet throughout the afternoon, watching and helping where he could, his young face serious with understanding beyond his years. Pa, he said suddenly, his head lifting like a deer sensing danger. I hear something. Ethan moved to the window, careful to stay hidden from direct view. For a moment, he heard nothing but the usual forest sounds, wind in the pines, birdsong, the soft nickering of their horses. Then came the distinct crack of a branch breaking under weight, followed by a man's voice quickly hushed by another. They had been found. 4 men moving in from the west, Ethan reported in a low voice, counting the shadowy figures advancing through the trees. They've spotted the shack. Sophia struggled to sit up, face pale with effort and pain. Give me pistol, she demanded, extending her hand. Ethan handed her the small firearm, noting the way her fingers curled around it with practiced familiarity despite her condition. You've used one before. My father teach me, she replied simply, for protection. Noah moved to the window on the opposite side of the shack, his small body tense but controlled. What do we do, Pa? Ethan considered their limited options. Fight, flee, or surrender. Fighting meant likely death for at least some of them. Fleeing was impossible with Sophia in labor. Surrender meant placing all their fates in Thornton's hands, a man who had already demonstrated his capacity for calculated cruelty. We negotiate, he decided, moving to gather Sarah's notebooks and the list from Sophia's father, their only leverage. Try to buy time. A voice called from the edge of the clearing, deliberately loud and clear. Reynolds, we know you're in there with the girl. Come out, and no one needs to get hurt. Ethan recognized Jackson's voice, Thornton's foreman, a man known for ruthless efficiency rather than unnecessary brutality. A practical adversary, perhaps, but not one inclined to mercy. My son is in here, Ethan called back, remaining hidden from direct fire. And a woman about to give birth. I'm asking you to withdraw, Jackson. This doesn't have to end in bloodshed. A pause followed, suggesting the foreman was considering his words. Thornton wants the girl and her baby, Jackson finally responded. Give them up, and maybe you and your boy can ride away. We both know that's not true, Ethan countered. Thornton wants us all silenced, especially now that we have evidence of his crimes. Another silence, longer this time. Ethan imagined Jackson conferring with his men, weighing options, planning approaches to the vulnerable structure. What evidence? Jackson called, eventually, a new note of wariness in his voice. Records of deaths at the Triple T witness testimony about the Black Canyon massacre. Proof that Sarah Reynolds and Miguel Diaz were murdered to silence them. Ethan's voice hardened. Enough to hang Theodore Thornton if it reaches a federal marshal. A low murmur of voices from the tree line suggested his words had created the intended effect. Uncertainty, perhaps even division among Thornton's men. Few hired guns were willing to face murder charges for their employer's crimes. Those are serious accusations, Jackson replied after a moment. Ones that need proper investigation. That's why we're taking the evidence to Tucson, Ethan explained, sensing a possible opening. Let us pass Jackson. This isn't your fight. Before the foreman could respond, Sophia cried out a sharp, involuntary sound, quickly bitten back as another contraction seized her. The noise, carrying clearly in the still afternoon air, changed the dynamic instantly. Sounds like that baby isn't waiting for Tucson. Jackson observed a new confidence in his tone. You're trapped, Reynolds. The girl can't travel and you won't leave her. Be reasonable. Surrender now and I give you my word, no harm will come to the child. And Sophia, Ethan demanded. What about her? Jackson's hesitation told Ethan everything he needed to know. Thornton wanted the child his grandchild, as he believed. Sophia, once she had served her purpose by delivering it safely, was expendable. Time's running out, Reynolds, Jackson called, avoiding the direct question. We can wait all night if necessary, but from the sounds of it, that baby's coming soon. Without proper help, things could go badly for the mother. It was a calculated appeal targeting Ethan's greatest fear. Childbirth was dangerous under the best circumstances. Here in a filthy shack and with minimal supplies and under siege, the risks multiplied exponentially. Sarah had died in a clean bed with a doctor attending. How much greater was the danger for Sophia? He's trying to rush us into a bad decision, Ethan told Sophia quietly, returning to her side. Playing on our fears. Sophia nodded, her face gleaming with perspiration in the dimming light. But he's right about one thing, she admitted. Baby coming soon. Very soon. She gripped Ethan's arm as another contraction began, this one visibly more powerful than the last. You must decide, Ethan. Fight or surrender. Noah, who had been listening intently from his post by the window, suddenly straightened. Pa, he whispered urgently. There's someone else out there, not Thornton's men. Look, Ethan moved cautiously to the window, following his son's pointing finger. At first, he saw nothing but the deepening shadows among the pines. Then a movement caught his eye, a figure moving with extraordinary stealth from tree to tree, approaching the shack from the east opposite Thornton's men. Then another figure and another, materializing like spirits from the forest. Apache. Sophia breathed, recognizing the distinctive silhouettes even through her pain. My mother's people. They come. Ethan counted at least 6 warriors, possibly more, their movements so fluid and silent that Thornton's men focused on the shack remained oblivious to their approach. The Apache were armed with rifles as well as traditional weapons, bows and lances, and positioned themselves with tactical precision around the clearing. Hope, unexpected and fragile, blossomed in Ethan's chest. How did they find us? They watch, always watch, Sophia explained between labored breaths. Know their land, know when strangers cross. A sharp bird-like whistle cut through the air, a signal from one Apache to the others. Jackson and his men reacted immediately, spinning toward the sound, finally aware of the new presence surrounding them. What the hell? Jackson's exclamation was cut short as an arrow thudded into the tree beside him, a clear warning shot. A commanding voice spoke from the deepening shadows. Drop weapons, or die where you stand. The speaker stepped forward, a tall, powerfully built Apache man of perhaps 50 years, his long hair streaked with gray, his face weathered by sun and wind. He carried a repeating rifle with the easy confidence of long familiarity. Jackson and his men, suddenly finding themselves outflanked and outnumbered, hesitated. Their hands hovered near their weapons, caught between fight and surrender. 4 against 6, Jackson calculated aloud, addressing the Apache leader. Not odds I'd choose, but not impossible either. Look again, the leader replied calmly. As if conjured by his words, more Apache warriors appeared from the surrounding forest, at least a dozen in total, each armed and positioned for maximum tactical advantage. The odds had shifted decisively, a fact Jackson recognized with a grimace of frustration. This isn't your fight, he tried, echoing Ethan's earlier words. We're after fugitives, not looking for trouble with your people. The woman you hunt is daughter of our daughter, the Apache leader stated flatly. The child she carries is blood of our blood. This is our fight by the oldest law. Inside the shack, Sophia's grip on Ethan's hand tightened painfully as another contraction seized her. It is Red Hawk, she whispered when she could speak again. My mother's brother, the war chief. Ethan felt a surge of gratitude toward this unexpected ally, even as practical concerns asserted themselves. Will he let us go? Help us reach Tucson? First baby, Sophia reminded him, her voice strained. Baby comes now. Outside, the confrontation continued. Jackson, recognizing the impossibility of his position, slowly raised his hands. Looks like you have us at a disadvantage, he acknowledged. What now? Red Hawk gestured with his rifle. Now you leave. Return to Thornton. Tell him the woman and child are under Apache protection. Tell him we remember Black Canyon. Tell him we have not forgotten our dead. The meaning was unmistakable, a declaration not just of protection for Sophia, but of long-held grievance against Thornton himself. Jackson, whatever his personal loyalty to his employer, was practical enough to recognize when retreat was the only viable option. This isn't over, he warned, signaling his men to back toward their horses. Thornton won't stop until he gets what's his. Nothing here belongs to Thornton, Red Hawk replied. Not land, not woman, not child. Go now while you still can. Jackson and his men mounted their horses, outnumbered and outmaneuvered but still defiant. Reynolds, he calls toward the shack. This changes nothing. Thornton will find you with or without Apache help. They rode away, disappearing into the gathering dusk, with a reluctant pace of men planning to return. Ethan watched them go, relief mingling with the knowledge that this was merely a reprieve, not a resolution. Red Hawk approached the shack, his warriors maintaining vigilant positions around the clearing. Sofia Diaz, he called, daughter of Elena Diaz of the Aravipa band. We have come for you. Ethan moved to the door, opening it cautiously. She's inside, he confirmed, in labor. The baby is coming soon. Red Hawk studied Ethan with penetrating dark eyes, assessing him with the careful scrutiny of a man accustomed to judging threats. You are the white man who sheltered her? Yes, Ethan Reynolds, and my son Noah. The Apache leader nodded slowly, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts. Sophia spoke of you when she sent message. Message? Ethan asked, surprised. When did she send a message? The bird carving, Noah interjected, understanding dawning on his young face. The one she kept under her pillow. It was a signal, wasn't it? Red Hawk's gaze shifted to the boy, a flicker of something like approval crossing his stoic features. The child sees clearly. Yes, the carving is old sign between our families. When placed where eagle can see, it calls for help. Ethan remembered the small wooden bird Sophia had shown him, the carving Sarah had given her years ago after the Black Canyon massacre. He hadn't seen her place it anywhere prominent, but she must have done so during their journey, perhaps at one of their rest stops. A cry from within the shack interrupted his thoughts, Sophia's voice no longer able to contain her pain as her labor intensified. Red Hawk signaled to someone behind him, and two Apache women emerged from the forest carrying bundles of what appeared to be medical supplies. Our healers, Red Hawk explained. They help with birth. Ethan stepped aside, allowing the women to enter. They moved directly to Sophia's side, speaking to her in rapid Apache, a language she clearly understood, responding in the same tongue despite her exhaustion. The women will care for her, Red Hawk told Ethan. You and boy come. Not good for men to be present at birth. Noah looked to his father uncertainly. Should we leave her, Pa? Ethan hesitated, reluctant to abandon Sophia after promising to stay. One of the Apache women, older with silver-streaked hair and a face lined with experience, turned to him with unexpected gentleness. We care for her like daughter, she assured him in accented English. Baby come safe with our help. Better you go now. Sophia managed a nod despite her pain. Go with Red Hawk, she urged. I am safe now, with my people. The simple statement, my people, carried profound meaning. After years of existing between worlds, neither fully Mexican nor fully Apache, Sophia had found her place. The recognition of kinship in Red Hawk's arrival represented more than physical rescue. It was spiritual homecoming. We'll be nearby, Ethan promised, squeezing her hand one last time. Noah and I will wait for news of the baby. Outside, Red Hawk led them to a small campfire that his warriors had established at the edge of the clearing. The Apache moved with practiced efficiency, setting guards, preparing food, creating a temporary but secure encampment with the ease of men accustomed to living on the move. Jackson and his men won't go far, Ethan observed, accepting a cup of strong black coffee from one of the warriors. They'll report to Thornton, gather reinforcements. Red Hawk nodded, unsurprised by this assessment. They return tomorrow or next day, with more guns. His tone was matter-of-fact, neither concerned nor dismissive. By then we'd be gone. Gone where? Ethan asked. Sophia can't travel immediately after giving birth. Ways exist that white men do not know, Red Hawk replied cryptically. Paths through mountains that horses cannot follow, that soldiers cannot find. Noah, sitting close to his father, looked up at the Apache leader with undisguised curiosity. Will you take us too, or just Sophia and the baby? The direct question from a child seemed to catch Red Hawk off guard, a fleeting smile softening his weathered features. That depends, young one, on what your father seeks. Justice, Noah answered without hesitation. For my mother, for Sophia's father, for all the people Mr. Thornton hurt. Pa says we need to get to Tucson to tell the federal marshal the truth. Red Hawk's gaze shifted to Ethan, suddenly more intense. Your woman, she died because of Thornton. Ethan nodded grimly. I believe so. She was gathering evidence against him, working with Sophia's father. Both died before they could bring that evidence to light. And now you carry this evidence, these proofs. Yes, Sarah's notebooks documenting injuries and deaths at the Triple T Ranch. Miguel Diaz's list of killings. Sophia's testimony about the Black Canyon massacre. Red Hawk was silent for a long moment, staring into the fire, as if reading answers in the flame. My people have sought justice for Black Canyon for 12 years, he finally said. 12 years of waiting, watching, remembering our dead. The white man's law gives us no peace, no justice. The law failed you, Ethan acknowledged, just as it failed Sarah and Miguel Diaz and all the others Thornton has harmed. But with enough evidence, with testimony from multiple sources, even Thornton can't escape justice forever. You still believe in white man's justice after all you have seen? It was a fair question, one Ethan had asked himself repeatedly since discovering Sarah's notebooks. His faith in the legal system had been badly shaken 3 years ago, when his investigation into deaths at the Triple T was shut down. Sarah's probable murder had further eroded that faith. I believe in the possibility of justice, he answered carefully. Not perfectly, not always, but enough to keep fighting for it. The alternative is to surrender to men like Thornton, to accept that power and money can buy immunity for any crime. Noah, listening intently, added with childish directness, Mom always said that doing right matters even when it's hard, even when you might lose. Red Hawk studied the boy with newfound interest. Your mother was wise woman. The Apache also believed this, that how we fight matters more than winning or losing. He turned back to Ethan. Tell me more about evidence you carry. For the next hour, as darkness settled completely over the mountain, Ethan explained the contents of Sarah's notebooks and Miguel Diaz's list. He detailed the systematic pattern of abuse and murder at the Triple T Ranch, the suspicious timing of Sarah's death after she contacted Miguel Diaz, and Thornton's attempt to claim Sophia's unborn child as his grandchild and heir. Red Hawk listened without interruption, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts. Only when Ethan mentioned the Black Canyon massacre did a flicker of old pain cross the Apache leader's face. I lost wife there, he said quietly, and daughter, 7 summers old. His hand moved to a small pouch at his waist, similar to the one Sophia carried, perhaps containing some memento of his lost family. Many lost more. I'm sorry, Bone. Ethan said the words inadequate but sincere. Truly. Red Hawk acknowledged this with a slight nod. Sorrow does not change past. Action changes future. He studied Ethan with renewed intensity. You seek federal marshal in Tucson. Why not local law? Sheriff Holloway is compromised, afraid of Thornton's influence, if not actively corrupt. The circuit judge is in Thornton's pocket. We need to go above their heads to someone beyond local influence. Marshal Harrison, Red Hawk said, surprising Ethan with his knowledge of federal law enforcement. Honest man, they say, hard but fair. You know him, know of him. He treat Apache with respect when others do not. Red Hawk's expression grew thoughtful. If your evidence strong enough, he might act even against man like Thornton. A cry from the direction of the shack interrupted their conversation, not a cry of pain, but the unmistakable wail of a newborn taking its first breath. Noah's head jerked up, his eyes wide with wonder and concern. The baby, he exclaimed. It's here. Red Hawk rose to his feet in a single fluid motion, his stoic expression softening slightly. New life comes. Good omen. They waited in tense silence, the baby's cries gradually subsiding to hiccuping whimpers and then silence. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours before the door of the shack opened and the older Apache woman emerged. Her face, tired but satisfied, broke into a smile as she approached. Girl child, she announced. Strong, healthy. Mother also well. Relief washed over Ethan, a profound, almost physical sensation. Despite his outward confidence, he had feared a repeat of Sarah's tragic outcome, another life lost in the struggle against Thornton's cruelty. Can we see them? Noah asked eagerly, already halfway to his feet. The woman nodded, her smile widening at the boy's enthusiasm. Yes, but quiet. Mother very tired. Inside the shack, transformed by the careful attention of the Apache healers, Sophia reclined on a bed now padded with fresh pine boughs and clean blankets. Her face, though drawn with exhaustion, glowed with a serene joy as she cradled a small bundle against her chest. Ethan, Noah. Her voice was weak but warm with welcome. Come meet my daughter. They approached reverently, Noah moving to Sophia's side with the same careful gentleness he had shown throughout their journey. Sophia shifted the blanket to reveal the infant's face, tiny perfect, with the same rich copper skin and dark hair as her mother. She's beautiful, Noah whispered, reaching out one finger to touch the baby's impossibly small hand. What will you name her? Ethan asked, moved by the scene before him, this new life miraculous in its timing and significance. Sophia looked up at him, her dark eyes soft with emotion. Sarah, she said simply, for your wife who helped my people, for woman who saved many lives before her own was taken. Ethan felt his throat constrict with unexpected emotion. Sarah, he repeated the name, a benediction and promise combined. It's perfect. Red Hawk, who had followed them into the shack, moved forward to look upon the newborn. His weathered face, usually impassive, softened as he gazed at the child. Daughter of our daughter, he murmured in Apache, then switched to English. She belongs to the people. She will be protected. Sophia nodded, understanding the deeper meaning of his words. The baby would be accepted as fully Apache, despite her mixed heritage granted the full protection of the tribe. What happens now? Ethan asked, his mind returning to practical concerns. Thornton's men will return, probably with reinforcements. We leave before dawn, Red Hawk decided. Take hidden paths through mountains. 4 days to reach main camp. And then, Ethan pressed, Sophia and the baby will be safe with your people, but the evidence still needs to reach Tucson. Thornton still needs to face justice. Red Hawk regarded him steadily. You still determined to follow white man's law, even knowing it may fail? I have to try, Ethan replied simply. For Sarah's sake. For all those who died without justice. The Apache leader seemed to come to a decision. Then we help. Guide you through mountains by paths Thornton's men cannot follow. Take you to a place where you can reach Tucson safely. He glanced at Sophia and the baby. They stay with us until danger pass. Noah looked up from where he sat beside Sophia, his young face troubled. We're going to separate, but Pa, we promise to stay together. Ethan knelt beside his son, placing his hands on the boy's shoulders. Sometimes keeping everyone safe means making hard choices, Noah. Sophia and baby Sarah need rest and protection. The safest place for them is with Red Hawk's people. And the safest path for evidence is with you, Sophia added gently. With both of you. Noah can help tell story of his mother's work, make Marshall understand importance. Noah considered this, his expression serious beyond his years. Will we see them again? After we talk to the marshal. Yes, Ethan promised, hoping he spoke truth. Once Thornton is brought to justice, we'll find Sophia and the baby. We'll make sure they're safe. This seemed to satisfy Noah. He turned back to Sophia and the infant, his earlier anxiety replaced by solemn purpose. I'll help Pa make sure the bad men can't hurt you anymore, he told her. I promise. Sophia touched his cheek with her free Arrington. I know you will, Noah. You brave boy like your mother was brave woman. As the night deepened around the small shack in the mountains, plans were made and preparations begun. Red Hawk's warriors established a defensive perimeter, ensuring that Thornton's men couldn't approach undetected if they returned during the night. The Apache women tended to Sophia and the newborn, applying traditional medicines and ensuring both mother and child were comfortable for the journey ahead. Ethan, sitting by the small fire with Noah asleep against his shoulder, gazed up at the star-filled sky. Somewhere up there, Sarah had once told Noah the souls of good people watched over those they had loved in life. He wondered if she was watching now, guiding them on this dangerous path toward justice. We're going to finish what you started, Sarah, he whispered to the silent stars. We're going to make it right. In the peaceful moment between one day's dangers and the next, Ethan allowed himself to feel the first tentative stirrings of hope, not just for justice, but for a future beyond vengeance. A future where Noah could grow up unburdened by grief and secrets. Where baby Sarah could thrive among her mother's people. Where the truth about Black Canyon and all of Thornton's crimes would finally be known. The path ahead remained dangerous and uncertain, but for the first time in 3 years, Ethan Reynolds felt truly alive, connected to something larger than his own pain, committed to a purpose worthy of Sarah's memory and legacy. Dawn would bring new challenges, new dangers, new decisions. But for now, in this moment of hard-won peace, it was enough to know they had found allies in their fight, that Sophia and her child were safe, and that justice, elusive but still possible, waited on the horizon, to be added at the end of the current chapter. 3 weeks later, a small company of riders appeared at the office of Federal Marshal Harrison in Tucson. Ethan Reynolds, wearing his cleanest clothes, stood straight-backed as he and Noah entered the imposing building, Sarah's notebooks and Miguel Diaz's list carefully wrapped in a leather pouch. Will he believe us, Pa? Noah asked, his voice quiet but resolute. The evidence will speak for itself, Ethan replied, though even he felt a tinge of apprehension. Thornton's influence ran deep, but this time they were not alone. Standing beside them was Deputy Rivera, who had surrendered his badge to testify to what he knew. And behind them, waiting in the shadows, stood Red Hawk and 2 of his Apache warriors dressed in civilian clothes, ready to tell the story of Black Canyon. Even Sheriff Holloway, who had avoided responsibility for too long, had agreed to testify after Thornton had attempted to eliminate him when he voiced concerns. As they were led into Marshal Harrison's office, Ethan felt a strange sense of peace. Whatever the outcome, he was fulfilling his promise, to Sarah, to Sophia, to Noah, and to himself. You're certainly making serious allegations, Mr. Reynolds, Marshal Harrison said, examining the evidence before him with keen focus. But I must say this is the most compelling evidence I've ever seen against a man as powerful as Thornton. And what will you do with it, sir? Ethan asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Justice, Harrison answered simply, for all the victims. 2 days later, when Thornton was arrested at his mansion, the headline of the Tucson Star told the story Thornton had believed would never be told. Land Baron arrested federal marshal charges Thornton with multiple murders and crimes against Apache people. Ethan, reading the headline from the small hotel where he and Noah were staying, felt years of fear finally release their grip. Can we find Sophia and the baby now? Noah asked, having urged his father every day since they'd arrived in Tucson. Yes, Ethan said, smiling genuinely for the first time in years. It's time we find our family. In a valley hidden deep in the mountains where the Apache River rushed powerful through ancient rock faces, Sophia Diaz stood in the early sunlight, baby Sarah sleeping contentedly in a cradleboard on her back. The tribe had welcomed her as one of their own, and for the first time since she was a child, she felt at home. Yet as she gazed toward the trail leading into the valley, she knew her heart was waiting. She had corresponded with Ethan and Noah through Apache messengers, knew that justice was near, that Thornton would finally face his crimes. They will come, Red Hawk's voice sounded behind her bed. That man keeps his promises. I know, Sophia replied, smiling as she thought of the man who had risked his life to save her and the boy who had touched her heart with his courage and kindness. Some souls are destined to find each other. The sky above stretched endless. The same sky that Sarah Reynolds had taught her son was where good souls found their home. Perhaps Sophia thought she had been right in more ways than she could know. Not far down the trail, 2 riders approached the mountains guided by an Apache warrior. A man and a boy who had brought justice and now sought what they didn't know they had lost. A family. The line of redemption in the end wasn't the divide between good and evil or between justice and injustice. It was the thin boundary between those who were alone and those who had found each other.